The only person you should try to beat is the person you were yesterday?
Yes.
Is that something?
Yeah, I believe that wholeheartedly. I think that there's this, I don't know, I mean, I don't know where it comes from, but there's this sense of competition in the arts. And everybody is looking at their peers, the person next to them, and they're trying to make sure they're one-upping that person and trying to be better than that person. And then they start following these weird trends, and you find everybody doing the same thing. And their only sense of growth is growth is measured by how far they've distanced themselves from the next person. And for me, that's not the case. It makes it very tough to grow, and I'm always trying to learn and grow in everything I do. And the only way you can really measure that growth is if you look at the work that you've done before and how much more you've improved. How much closer are you to achieving whatever it is you see in your head? Because when I sit down and I write, I've seen the movie in my head. And when I step on the set, I'm ready to bring whatever's in my head to the screen. And the way I gauge my own success and the way I gauge my own growth is by how much closer have I gotten to that with each project. I feel like in the beginning, I was at I think one of the first films I did, I probably got like 5% of what was in my head on the screen, because it's all about learning how to communicate and work effectively with everyone on the set, you know? It's about the team, where the teamwork makes the dream work, right? And it's about learning how to work with your team. How do you deliver the information that they need in a way that they can understand and execute effectively? And with each project, I think you're supposed to grow and get better at that communication. And, you can view the work to see your growth. But if you're constantly measuring yourself by what everybody else is doing, where's your real growth?
True. Let me just play the devil's advocate for a second, though, because sometimes you can have a strong mindset like that, but then you get individuals from the side and they want to rope you into their competition. And it's up to you to say, oh, I don't think I'm playing today. But we're human, and we get, look, the movie 8th Grade, for those of us who remember being a female in 8th grade, it reminds me a lot of that, and there's still an aspect of that to adult life, and especially in entertainment. And so how do you handle when you can tell you're being challenged and roped into some kind of weird competitive thing, and you're saying, no, this is my path. My lane is here. Your lane is there. And
I think, fortunately, I haven't been roped into that. I do know a filmmaker who I think they're in competition with me, but I think that that's all in their head, because in order for it to be a competition, 2 people have to be playing. But I don't bother to participate, because I know what it is that I'm trying to accomplish. I know what my lane is, and the kind of projects that I'm looking to create and how I'm looking to create them. And realistically, the only person in that lane is me. And even if there was another person who was doing this the same or something similar, I would give them whatever knowledge I have to help them succeed at whatever they're trying to accomplish. Because that's the way we all win, is if we're all helping each other. I think that if you look at, let's just say the top 1% in Hollywood, right? They all really know each other. In some form or fashion, this guy knew that guy who worked with this guy, and they came up, and then this guy reached back and helped this guy, and then this lady helped this guy, and then this guy helped this lady. That's how it all went. Everybody helped everybody get to where they are by not considering themselves competition, by only wanting to see their peers succeed. I think that's the way it works. So even if I did realize that someone was trying to rope me into this competition, I would just say, what do you need from me to help you? That's the conversation I'd rather have. How can I help you? How can I help you? I want to help you grow. I want to help you succeed. I want to help you be the best you possible. So let's start working on that. Let's have that conversation.
you would really do that even if you saw like their sort of underhanded tactics, you would really want to help?
Well, because I guess their underhanded tactics, what would they be for me? I don't know what they would be for me, because I don't report to anyone. I finance my own projects. So how can they be underhanded? I guess if they were trying to maybe, influence an actor to not take the role or something like that. And I would just tell them, that's not cool that you did that, but I guess it serves some sort of purpose for you. You get some kind of satisfaction out of it, but whatever. Because ultimately, it's not going to change the fact that I'm still going to create this project. It's not going to really change that fact.
And did you notice that more when you came here to Southern California, or it was the same in Georgia? People are people everywhere.
Yeah, I think people are people everywhere. I think that here there's a bit more, fuel pushed into the fire because the stakes are so high and the opportunities are so small. I think that, that puts a little bit more fuel on the fire. But in saying that, the people who I've found that I worked with repeatedly are people who they only want to see everyone around them succeed. They're constantly trying to find opportunities to bring in more people that would find some sort of benefit from whatever they're doing. And that's what's made me keep working with them. And I see them being successful as well. I see them being successful now. And it's all because they'd much rather focus on reaching back and being of use than trying to compete. Just be of use. Like I told you, that was one of the things I learned from John Singleton. Be of use. Be helpful.
Never ruin a good day by thinking about a bad yesterday?
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I like that.
Leave that stuff in the past. Whatever it is, leave it in the past. It's not helpful. It's not helpful. I've found a lot of people who sit back and still talk about that film they made that one time that many years ago, and then this person ticked them off, and then it was this person's fault, and it was that, and it was this, and it was... Leave that stuff alone. Leave it in the past. Learn your lessons and take those lessons moving forward and apply them to whatever you're trying to create today. If you keep focusing on what happened yesterday, you have no appreciation for what's happening to you right now in the present, and you definitely can't really plan for the future because you're too busy thinking about what happened yesterday. Yesterday is gone. It's gone. So just leave the problems of yesterday back there and take the lessons you learned with you.
Like that one story of the guy that drives around with no rear view mirror. And they say, how come you don't have a rear view mirror? And he says, I don't need to see where I've been.
That's a great one. That's a great one.
I'm not sure if it's a real story, but I've heard other people say it. So,
yeah.
Do you think we can really live without pain and regret?
Do I think it's possible to live without pain and regret? I definitely think so. I think that the pain is just your way of, in some instances, I can't speak to all kinds of pain because some pain comes from the grief of losing someone or, so I can't speak to that type of pain, but I can talk to the pain of and the regret of making poor decisions. And I think that ultimately that type of pain and that type of regret is you understanding you've done something wrong, whether it be just incorrect or something actually wrong, and you need to actually fix that and learn your lesson from that and move forward and take that lesson with you. If you are constantly growing from the things that are happening to you in life, if you're constantly taking those lessons and moving forward to make sure they don't happen again, I do think you can live without that pain and that regret, that type of pain and that type of regret. Yeah, certainly.
Joston, can you explain to us why having a plan B, I believe, used to be very important to you and then it changed?
Oh, yeah, that's easy. If you have a plan B, you'll most often use a plan B. You'll never go as hard after plan A if you think you have something to fall back on. Throughout my entire life, everything I've done has been somewhat involved in the arts. I told you before, I drew comics, I wrote short stories. I was in the band. I did, I was in the chorus as well. I'm not a good singer though. But the thing about it is, it's always been in the arts, and the arts have always been something I pursued. But I've always been told, always have a plan B, always have a plan B, always have a plan B. So even going to college, I had a plan B. I knew that I wanted to be in the arts. I knew that I wanted to write, but I fell back on ROTC because I'd always been in ROTC even in high school. So I fell back on that, and I had something to work with. If nothing else worked, I could take up something in the military. But ultimately, as I moved further and further throughout this career, and I grew more and more inside of the career in this industry, I started to realize I never went as hard after my plan A because I was always focusing on keeping my plan B healthy. And all that energy that I was putting into plan B and constantly thinking of if this doesn't work, I can escape here. And if this doesn't work, I can escape here. Because I spent so much time doing that, I was taking away a lot of energy from plan A, where if I had have invested all of that and went full bore into that, I would have been much more successful quicker. I think that I do believe, opportunity meets preparation, and maybe it was the opportunities were coming along much later, but I think I would have created all new opportunities had I focused really hard and just more on plan A. I think that Warren Buffett said it, you only have to be right 51% of the time. That's it. You only have to be right 51% of the time to be successful. And if you were throwing everything you had at plan A, the chances of your success improve greatly. They just do.
I don't know too much about ROTC, but how much of that training or being around like minds helped you sort of be resilient and maybe take things less personal than others might take?
Well, I think that more than anything, it teaches you accountability and responsibility. And when you hold yourself accountable for something, it doesn't really matter. Other people's critique of whatever you do it's either constructive or not. And if it's not, you just toss it away because you yourself are holding yourself accountable to a higher standard than most other people would hold you to anyway. That's more than anything else is what I took away from ROTC, just that accountability and the responsibility.
Sure. So showing up,
Not only showing up, but showing up and being prepared, more prepared than everybody else is. Know as much as you possibly can about everything that's going on, and try to apply that to whatever your specific task is.
what kind of heart does it take to pursue this business? Or is heart not part of the picture?
Heart meaning passion. It has to be something that it has its own rechargeable battery. I think you have to go hard. I think you have to go hard all the time, and you have to. I know for me, I was having this conversation while I was saying before. I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I die to make a movie. I die to make a movie," and I say, I would never die to make a movie. It's not. There's tons of stories you can tell and all that stuff, but I die to finish one because with all the planning and everything that goes into making a movie, it's having that passion that's going to help you finish a movie. Because for all the movies that are out there that you can think of, think about it this way. If you saw 100 movies, there were probably 50,000 that they started making but never finished. And of that 50,000, there were probably 150,000 scripts that were in development and about to start production. So if you look at that number and it filters all the way down to just 100 films, it's not about getting the opportunity to make a film, it's about finishing a film. And that takes a passion where you have to go into it with the understanding that no matter how excited someone is about your project, be it the actor, the cinematographer, the editors, anybody who's working on that film that's not you, those people, for as excited as they are, they do not care as much as you do. They never will. So when things start breaking down and it's got to be spit, bubble gum, and duct tape to keep it together and to keep it moving, it's going to be you. It's going to be you. And the second you get tired and you can't finish it, that's when it stops. That's when it stops. Because you're the person, you're the battery. You have to keep recharging that battery, that passion. You have to keep it going, and it has to push you all the way through every adversity and every every obstacle to get to completion. It has to push you. And it can't die ever, because that's when the project will just cease to exist. And once it stops, it's very rare that projects get picked back up and they finish them. It's very rare. So I would say in terms of heart, I'd relate it to passion and say that, yeah, it has to be a rechargeable battery that just doesn't die. It can't die. Now, if you're saying what kind of heart in terms of caring and compassion and that sort of thing, I don't know how far that gets you. I don't know. I think if you get into films that are very much about society and how to push society forward and make people think about the world they live in and that sort of thing, if that's the direction you're going in, I think that having a heart is for compassion and love and all that great stuff. I think that it's it's paramount in that. Because it takes a great amount of willingness to understand people and open yourself up to learn about others and to learn about their cultures and whatever it is that you're going to be talking about in that film. It does take a great amount of heart and compassion to do that, to be willing to completely immerse yourself in someone else's world. But those are two very different hearts, I think. Two very different hearts.
Sure, and there can be a downside to the other heart in that things can affect you too much. I mean, there's been documentarians that have ended their lives because they saw things they didn't want to see.
Yeah.
About different countries or wherever and the atrocities that were going on. So it can also take you down in some ways.
Because there are things you can't unsee. And once you're made aware of them, your deep feeling for those things, it can affect you in some profound ways, in ways that you don't expect. You know, I will never forget, there was a time back in, what was it, maybe '09? Was it '09? Maybe '09. '09, I was doing marketing for a skilled nursing facility. And it required that I have a nursing background, but I said, there's nothing I can't learn. So, of course, I had to, really hit the books and learn a lot of nursing terms and things of that nature. But I digress. The thing is there was a patient of the skilled nursing facility that ended up in the hospital, and I had to go visit them and just kind of see how everything was going, make sure social workers were on it and everything. And they told me the guy wasn't going to be released because now he was definitely in need of a stay because he has a stage 4 decubitus ulcer. And I was like, stage 4 decubitus ulcer? I've heard of those. Those are bad. And they were like, yeah, they're bad. Here's a picture of it. And that picture, I can't unsee. I can't unsee. It's when a bed sore has basically eaten its way to the bone almost.
Wow.
And when I saw that, I was like, why would you not give me a second before you did that? That's permanently in my mind. And now I associate it with this patient that I've grown to care for. So now I'm more emotionally invested in this person. It makes it hard to do my job now because the only thing you're thinking about is their decubitus ulcer, but you forget the other reasons why they were there in the first place. The only thing you want to do is make sure that gets healed because that is the most painful thing that someone can go through. It's an incredibly painful thing. And if you've ever seen a stage 4 decubitus ulcer, I apologize to you in advance that you had to see it because it's a very nasty wound. Very nasty wound,
Well, maybe this is too personal. We can cut this out. So I'll ask it, and if you don't want to, did you move on from the job?
I did. I eventually had to move on from working in a skilled nursing facility. It was a place where you get to know everyone by name, and you get to learn their dietary needs and everything. You know more about them than their families do. And you spend more time with them than their families do. And you begin to care about them deeply. And to always, after it happens the first few times when someone that you know and that you speak to every day passes away, it's a huge shock. And it's something about that realization when there is no longer a shock. And that was the moment I realized I've been here too long. When I changed from talking about people that I know and that I care about, when I stop saying that they've passed away, that they've died, I stopped saying that and I started using the medical terminology, which was they expired. That's when I knew I think I need to step away from this. Death had become way too clinical for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you take time for yourself after that, or you had to go into another job right away?
No, I took a little time away. As a matter of fact, I think that was the impetus to make me say, I really just want to focus on the arts. I started having conversations with people, and I don't know how it sounds now. I really don't know, because back then it was so clinical, and it still feels clinical when I say it. But I started telling people, I've seen the end. Live your life the way you want to go out. Because ultimately that's what we're all doing. We just don't know it, but we're living our lives the way we want to go out. So either your mind's going to go first or your body, but live your life the way you want to go out. And as I said that more, I realized, you know what, I will start feeling that regret that I'm not supposed to feel if I don't now start going 100% after my plan A. That's when you'll start having that regret, when you see an opportunity that you let pass by. And doing that actually led me into the film Axeman at Cutter's Creek. It really did. It was because I left that and I just sat down and really just got back to writing and said, I just want to pursue this and I want to shoot a film by this date. I want to forget everything I've been doing before this and I want to shoot this film. And so that's what I did. I just devoted all my energy to that. And funny enough, a doctor that I met actually ended up financing that film. And so it just worked out, in that way. But the impetus for that, the thing that pushed me to get away from that and into this was that realization.
And sorry, this was the first Axeman?
The first Axeman,
Okay,
yes.
so 2012, 2013-ish?
Yeah, we shot it in 2012, I believe. Yeah.
Okay.
2012 is when we actually shot it. But before that, it was me writing and going to everyone and trying to figure out who was going to finance this thing. And, it eventually worked out. It was the first time I'd done that. Before that, prior to that, everything I'd done was self-financed. And then I just realized this one's too big of a film for me to finance on my own. And so I did go around looking for, a financier or producing partner, somebody to help me get the movie made.
And so we were coming out of a recession, and so when money was tight for a lot of these investors, or
money was very tight, and there's a certain amount of vanity and ego that comes along with, I guess, sometimes financiers. So that made it
Really? No.
that made it a little tough. It was very funny. I learned an interesting lesson. I have a buddy of mine, and I don't mind mentioning his name, and he won't mind either. His name is Eddie L. Watkins, and he's a very big stunt coordinator in the business, and he's producing now as well. And he was in these meetings with me as we were going around and everything, and one of the investors said, you know what, I would just prefer if we do these scenes the way I've written. And he hands me pages that he's now written to rewrite my script, right? And so he hands me these pages and he hands one to Eddie, and we're in this meeting and Eddie doesn't even read it. He just looks at me. And I'm reading, I'm looking at Eddie, and I'm like, I don't understand why you would do this. This is not, I'm trying to give him my notes on what he'd written. And the guy is puffing up his chest, and he's doing those things. And again, Eddie's just watching. And the guy won't accept any notes. He says to us, look, this is how the film needs to be written if you want my money. Because he who makes the gold, or he who has the gold, makes the rules. Guy actually said that.
Wow.
And Eddie, without missing a beat, says, that's only if we want your gold. And I look at him like, are we walking? And he says, yeah, we're walking. That's it. Meeting over. And we literally walked out of the door, and that was it. And I thought, oh, we finally had a guy, you know? And you don't want to work with a guy like that. Because if you can't get along with him now, and if he has no flexibility now, he'll have none during production, and he'll think that every idea is supposed to end up on the screen. And that's not someone you want to work with, especially if their ideas don't work for the project. And it was very funny because walking away from that, we eventually walked into the investor that we did use. Yeah, it was a very scary time because I'd walked away from that job and I spent a lot of time trying to get the ball rolling. But what I did was I took plan B and I tossed it. And everything that came below that, no plan C, D, no escape routes, no nothing. I want to make this movie and I want to make it next. And that's exactly what happened because I didn't give myself an alternative. I didn't give myself, you know, a way out of it, a way for it not to occur.
When you met with he who has the gold makes the rules person, how many investors in was that? How many meetings in? Was that a first meeting?
No, that was probably our second.
Okay.
That was probably our second or third. Yeah, probably our second or third.
But you and your friend, the stunt coordinator, both just had like a gut reaction, like if it's bad now, this is the honeymoon phase. It's not going to improve.
Well, here's the backstory to that, which is that Eddie has been in the industry forever. He started out as Eddie Murphy's bodyguard. That's how he started out, and eventually he got into the industry as a stunt guy, and he eventually got into the place where he now coordinates all the stunts. And he has just a long history in the film, and he has a lot of experience. So he gave me many life lessons along the way. But in this one, he'd done it so much where he didn't even need to read the paper. It didn't matter because this is the guy who wrote it and he knows if it's good or not. That was his only point. I would know if it's good or not. And if it's not appropriate for the film, we're not going to do it. So that's how that decision got made.
We republished this tweet from The Numbers Game on our channel page, and it says, Squid Game creator wrote the show in 2009 but was rejected by studios for 10 years. He once had to stop writing the script and sell his $675 laptop due to money troubles. And today, Squid Game is #1, I guess, in 90 countries, and is set to become the most watched show in Netflix history. What is your reaction to this story, this chain of events?
I mean, if it's true, it's awesome. It's that feeling of the never say die attitude. No matter how much rejection you get, you still keep plowing forward. And I love those stories. I do. I think that if the story is completely third party, then I feel that it's an awesome story of perseverance. But if it's a Netflix story, which I'm a Netflix subscriber, I definitely watch it, but they can tell you what's #1 and you just have to believe that it's true. We have no way of verifying that it's #1, only that they said it was #1. I always wonder that whenever I'm looking at like this is #1 for the week and #10 for the week. I'm like, how do we really know that that's #1 and #10? It's just because we went there and they told us that it was. So, but like I said before, if the story is true and it's a third party story, that's a great story of perseverance. I think that people are born with a lot of quit in them for some reason. I don't know, or maybe it's developed over the years, but when they start to reach those obstacles or any kind of adversity, it's very easy to give up. And unfortunately, I think that we all have people in our lives who care about us greatly. They care about us deeply. And they will see us going through some adversity and it's like, oh man, it's been years. You probably should, maybe you should start thinking about something else, because they care about you and they want you to be successful and they don't want to see you kind of beating your head against the wall. And they'll sometimes advise you to maybe throw in the towel on this one. And I'm pretty sure he had that person next to him telling him that. And when I always hear about people who have those advisors with them, I always say, find new advisors. Because the only thing that people should help you understand is why you care so deeply about what you're doing. That's always the real question. Why do you care so deeply? And after that, they should just be trying to help you achieve whatever the goal is you're trying to achieve, or give you the best advice they could on how to achieve it, you know?
I know you said you left your job as a marketing coordinator at a skilled nursing facility, but have you ever been tempted to give up on films? As many roller coaster rides as you've been on, it sounds like?
No. I've had times where it was tough, and ultimately you had to feed the safe. You know, you have to say, okay, you know, I gotta focus on putting money over here and this and that. But they always say that the line between self-belief and delusion is very thin. And I must be riding that line, because I've always believed, especially after I left the skilled nursing facility, that it's this or bust. It's this or bust. And I'm very, very fortunate that I've gotten to a point where now I self-finance all of my projects. And, you know, I think that I can service two different demographics. I can service the horror crowd, which is what most people know my work from, is horror, and that, like 80s style horror. And then I can also serve a niche of people who are like me, who like the kind of stuff that I like. And that's a smaller niche, but I can still serve that niche. And that's where I get to really be the most creative that I could possibly be. But that took time to get to that point. And it took a lot of sacrifice to get to that point. And I think there are moments in everybody's life where they realize that, man, this is very difficult. And I wonder if the juice is worth the squeeze at this point. But it is my belief that once you start to feel that, that's when you should be your most decisive in going forward. And the reason is because success and everything you're looking for is just on the other side of that. It's when you don't have the teeth to keep going and you give up, you cut yourself short, and you always wonder, what if I'd have just kept going? What if I'd have just given it another this, or made that one extra phone call? But I never want those questions. And what I found is right when you get past that point, everything I was looking for was just on the other side. It was just on the other side. And I'm starting to reap a lot of the benefits of that perseverance and continuously going forward.
Would you say that's one of your biggest fears, is the fear of regret? You don't ever want to get to a certain point and go, I wish I had just done this, tried harder? Or?
No, I think more than anything, I don't want to feel like, and it's gonna sound really weird, but I don't want to feel like life beat me. I don't want life to beat me. I've seen life beat so many people, most people around me. Life beat them. When you ask them what happened, what do most people say? Life happened, man. I had it there, and then this happened and that. I don't want life to beat me. I take everything that comes with life and I try to use it to my benefit. Everything. You know, at this point, my wife is pregnant, right? Guess who's gonna be in my movie? It's my kid. He's gonna be the star of the movie. You take everything that's coming to you and you use it. Whatever happens in my life, I use it. If it's something crazy and wild happened, it's a story in the script. If this happened and that, it's in the script. I'm taking everything that comes towards me and I'm using it. I'm using it as fuel. I'm using it as something to keep moving forward. Life won't beat me. It won't.
We're hoping to get your reaction to this comment, and that is, this is not a triumph. It's a tragedy, and it's a sign of just how much the industry needs to do better, because creative, original work should not be just a long struggle to put it out. Referring to the Squid Game.
Mm-hmm.
And what are your thoughts on that? He didn't let life beat him.
No, he didn't let life beat him, but to
He's
say
doing
it's
well
not a
now.
triumph, it's a tragedy. It's like, wow, really? I don't, look, you, everything that we do, especially in this industry, everything you're trying to do is met with resistance and opposition. It just is. It is. If the way I try to explain it to certain people when they say, oh, it's nepotism and this person and this is why I can't get in. And okay, let's say you are trying to get through the door, okay? In every film I've worked with, let's say we take the collective of everybody I've worked with in that film, maybe 7% of them are people I actually work with again. Maybe, okay? And it all has to do with the way I run my set and what I expect from people. In the end, not everybody is gonna operate at that same level, okay? And while I can be very chill, I can also be pretty intense, you know? Now, because I'm very passionate about what I'm doing. So if that's the case, after a certain amount of time, I'm hopeful that the percentage of people that I'm working with is growing, so that now I'm carrying over most people from one project to the next. Why am I doing that? Because these are the people that I know. These are the people that I trust, okay? And I want to keep them next to me and I want to keep them working with me. So when the next person comes along and they say, well, guess what? I can do this and I can do that. I say, you probably could, and you're probably great at it. But then I would have to take a chance. And maybe on this project, I'm already taking these chances. I can't afford to take that chance. And that person can see that as an obstacle to their growth and to their success because they couldn't get that position on that film. They couldn't get that thing out there. And if they go to more and more people like me who begin to accumulate a nice team that they work with, a team that makes everything work smoothly, they're going to meet that same opposition, right? And it will become a game in terms of trying to find that crack to squeeze in to get whatever it is that you're trying to get made. So when people speak of the struggle to get things done, that's really the struggle. The struggle is, first of all, he's written something, right? And he has to get it in front of someone to read it. Well, guess what? There's hundreds and thousands of other scripts that are trying to be read. Everybody's trying to get their stuff made. The key is going to be the perseverance and to keep going. And that, to me, is the triumph of the story. As I said, if it's the true story and it's, you know, a third party and they're talking about it, to me, that is a triumph. That's not a tragedy. It's a triumph. You took something that is not a very, it's not a cheap story to make. Like, you can't go out and get a camera phone and shoot that. Like, it doesn't work the same. He's gonna need a serious budget. Guess what? That's even more competitive, because to get people to spend the millions of dollars that it's gonna take to make that and market that, that's tough. It's very competitive. And it shouldn't be easy, because if it were easy, it wouldn't be worth it. So, excuse me, sorry. I disagree with that. It's not a tragedy, it's a triumph.
What was behind door number one, what we didn't tell you, what was missing from that tweet, is that director Huang did not stop during those 10 years. He kept working and he wrote and directed, I guess, 3 projects during that time. And a lot of people, they may have just been stuck on that first one and trying to make that one happen. So he, for whatever reason, kept going and made other work. And I don't know the exact story of how it happened, but it sounds like he wasn't going to let life beat him down either. So
yeah,
I like
it's
that.
a story of perseverance. Like I said, he may feel that it was a tragedy. He may, because, you know, 2 people looking at the same event can see 2 totally different things, right? To me, that's not a tragedy. To me, that's a triumph. And hearing that he made other projects while he was trying to get that one made even further, you know, solidifies that. It's perseverance at its best. And it's never giving up. And His plan A, I don't think, was just to make Squid Game. His plan A was to be successful and get something made. And that's exactly what he was getting done. Squid Game just took a little bit longer than the others, but ultimately he got that one done as well.
When you were on your way out from the nursing home, did people try to talk you out of leaving?
Yes. Yeah. But I always make sure that I seek first to understand and then to be understood. And I could understand why they didn't want me to go, because, you know, I was a salesman and I was pretty, you know, decent at what I did. So they didn't want me to leave because then that meant that they would have to find another salesperson and then they would have to take a gamble, you know, and see if that person would work out. And when it comes to the healthcare industry, especially when it's end of life and it's you know, assisted living facilities, it's skilled nursing facilities, home health, and hospice, is super competitive. It's super competitive. So you need very aggressive salespeople. And that was ultimately why they didn't want me to go. I mean, I think there were a couple people who just like talking to me every day.
Sure, yeah.
And those people didn't want me to go. And I think a few of the patients, but I think, or residents, I should say. But for the most part, it was because of my skills that they didn't want me to leave. And once I understood that, I said, that's even more of a reason to kind of leave and not feel too bad about it, you know.
Well, they tried to talk Jeff Bezos out of making Amazon, so.
Well, there you
There
go.
you go. Can you talk about the decision that you were not going to make movies by committee anymore? And what does that mean?
For me, it's going back to accountability and being able to hold myself accountable for not growing, for not achieving the level of growth that I need to achieve. When you're making a movie by committee, which I understand completely that most industry movies are made by, when it's, you know, studio or whatever, but going through that many levels of decision making and, you know, this person believes they know what's better for the film, they know what's better for the audience, they know what's better for marketing, they know what's, I believe you need one voice. We need one voice that ultimately makes the decision of what to do inside of the film. You can definitely confer with everyone around you. When I hire an actor, I hire them because they are the best at what they do and they fit this role. And when they read the script, they're going to be able to tell me things to a level of detail that maybe I haven't thought about, right? And I trust their intuition. And I'm going to figure out a way where we can kind of make that work inside the film. But that's not what I mean by committee. What I mean by committee is a executive producer who now says, you know what? And this is a real thing that happened. Yeah, I think we need a topless scene right now. And how? In what way? You know, it's like, at what time would somebody take their clothes off? That doesn't even make any sense. There's a murderer running around and everybody's in the same room. Like, what would be the reason that they would need to, you know, and it's like a lot of those decisions that are just made because people want to be heard and they want to see whatever they've said show up on the film. It's a vanity. And ultimately, when you're making movies like that and by committee with multiple people having all of this input, your film is getting further and further and further away from what you're trying to achieve. And as I said, the only person I'm really competing with is the person that I was yesterday. I'm constantly trying to grow. And how can I measure my growth if everything around me is being affected by people who are not me? And people who've already articulated that it has to be in there or, you know, basically they can withdraw funding. That's ultimately what it is that the decisions when they're being made by committee are made by people who can ultimately make the decision of, if you won't do what I'm asking you to do, if you won't put this in the film, I can withdraw funding. And I can do it at any time. I can do it at any point because, again, they're not as invested in the film as you are. They're invested in their own vanity a lot of the times. Not all the times. There are some great financiers out there and some great executive producers, but unfortunately, I haven't worked with them, you know, but the ones that I've worked with have been kind of vain. And it has been the vanity of having whatever was in their head added to the film, even if it doesn't make sense story-wise.
Sure, and in any relationship where someone's giving you money, they kind of own you in a sense.
They do. They do. And especially when you know that they can pull the plug. And it's the reason why I have overlooked a lot of the things that have been done on the set. You have to let a lot of things go and try to control the things you can control. But along the way, this committee will continuously try to influence everything that you do. And it makes your personal growth you can't measure it because it's not really you. It's you plus that guy and that lady and that kid. You know, it's you plus all of this when it should be you making the sole decision. Now you can take inspiration from what other people say. You can take some advice from what other people say, if it applies, if it's applicable, but you can ultimately decide if it's not. And I only began to get that sense of freedom when I started to finance my own projects. That's when I began to see it.
What kind of sacrifices did you have to make to be able to finance your own work?
Security.
Financial security?
Oh yeah,
Oh, okay.
for a while. For a while, financial security. A lot of things that probably too many to name, but things that would have certainly made my young lady happy. We had to sacrifice a lot. We had to sacrifice a lot of time that you would normally spend together. I was holed up by myself doing so many things myself because whatever you can't pay for, you have to assume that responsibility yourself. So even when we would be sacrificing financially, we were also sacrificing just the time we got to spend together. And it was a very hard time in the beginning, a very hard time. But here's the thing is, and I don't advise that people just run out and start self-financing their own stuff. I would say before you do that, understand how distribution works. Because once you understand how you make your money back, then you can justify how much money you spend on a project, right? You don't want to you don't want to take, a loan out for $80,000, $100,000 and make a movie that you're only going to make $5,000 from. You need to stack as many stack as much of the deck in your favor as possible. So, but in the beginning, I certainly had to sacrifice financial security, and I had to sacrifice a lot of time and spend a lot of time away from my lady, and I've been away from my family since 2004. I go back home every once in a while to Georgia, but for the most part, my family has seen me on average maybe once every 3 years, maybe every 2 years, but I probably lean towards the 3. I don't go home that often. So there's been a lot of sacrifice to get to where I am today.
And when you're writing a script, is it now in your mind that, okay, this is going to cost too much and I'm not going to make my money back on this. I have to change this scene?
No, I'm always aware of the story that I'm writing and the budget that it falls within. I make sure I tell the truth in the story, and budget should never dictate truth, but budget should dictate what you're trying to do as a whole. I don't think you should make a sci-fi opera if you only have $2,000. I think that's setting yourself up for failure. I think that if you're going to tell a very intimate story between two characters that, they met outside of a motel, in the parking lot, and they're developing this romance over 2 days at the motel, and one guy is there on a business trip and the lady lives there, whatever. But if you're trying to make something very small and mostly just the conversations that they have between one another and that's easy to do. And that's very inexpensive. But if one of them is a cybernetic organism and they shapeshift and they walk through these wormholes that constantly open up, and now all the machines are coming out to attack everybody and the motel blows up, then I think you've kind of set yourself up for failure.
You used to rely on investors to make your films. Now you don't. And we'd love to know the economics of what you did when you had investors and now what you do as a self-financier.
I would say that now I make less financial mistakes. When I worked with investors, I knew enough to know that I was always going to need a reserve, right? So whenever I spoke to someone about the budget, I always said, make sure we also have, this much in reserve. And I wrote the script, and more often than not, I would have to use that reserve. And you would often find that you're using that reserve in post-production because more of the money got used in production than you thought would have been. As I've now begun to do it myself, I budget actually over what I would actually need. And I try to save as I go along, as opposed to the, working backwards where you budget just enough and then I was like, oh, this costs more than I thought it would. Or, maybe we missed a day and then we have to add another day to production. Or, you don't realize the problems you're going to have until you start having them. And that was what I was going through during the period of time of having investors. So now I think I make less financial mistakes, less budgetary mistakes and scheduling mistakes now that I'm financing it myself. And it's mainly just because I have the experience.
And how are you able to save? Because you know how different things can happen. There can be rain and you have to shut it down for the afternoon, different things.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the things you've learned can help actually save on production?
We always have, you have the schedule as it's supposed to be, but then we know that if we have days where weather impacts shooting, then we have like a safe shoot. So we always know, okay, these are the things we're gonna shoot. But if on any one of these days, rain is not permitting or something happens out on the road or whatnot, we can go back and we can shoot this inside. And that way you don't lose any days. You're just moving things around in the schedule. I think that I think about this day and I'm like, how could I be so crazy? We were shooting Axeman actually. And one of the days the executive producer showed up and for whatever reason, he came in, we were shooting one scene inside and then we were supposed to be shooting something else outside and then it just started pouring rain. And so we came in and we all sat down and we just waited for the rain to stop. Hours, we waited for the rain to stop. Instead of shooting anything else, we were actually shooting something indoors already. And then we stopped shooting that because that was over. And then we decided to shoot outside. When we couldn't shoot outside, we didn't shoot anything. And it was a completely lost day. Like, I want to say 4 hours of not shooting when we could have been shooting any number of scenes inside. And that was one of the biggest takeaways from that is once I thought about it, I was like, I am nuts for allowing that to happen. We should have moved on and shot something else. So I learned a lot of things early on that I carried over into, the ones that I executive produce now as well. And so that's all the lessons. I've told you, every time something happens, you have to learn that lesson and carry that lesson forward. And that was one of the ones that, I certainly learned. So I always have backups for, exterior shoots.
So even if you have to shoot something out of order,
Mm-hmm.
then as long as just keep everybody there and keep it rolling. Kind of thing.
Yeah. The only film where that would have been tough was the one I just finished shooting, Wanton One. That one, we had the complexity of the beard because his beard was either there or not there. And so everything with the beard had to be shot, together. So you couldn't jump the line and go shoot something else because he's not supposed to have a beard. So, that was the only one that presented an issue.
How much money was going into your movies when you were dealing with the financiers?
We always made sure we didn't spend more than 100. We never spent more than 100. Unless you're shooting with massive names, or if you're shooting something that, of course, if it's something that is going to use up most of the budget, like I just finished working with someone who was doing a film where, it's dinosaurs and It's a very different thing, right? So a lot of money is going to go towards CGI and all that stuff. So, but if you're shooting the kind of movies that I shoot that rely on practical effects and things of that nature, and the stars are not huge and stuff like that, I don't believe it should go over 100. I believe anytime you're going over 100, you're really rolling the dice. I think you're rolling the dice anyway, but you're really rolling the dice over 100 because I believe that with a smart marketing plan, even with a bunch of flaws, you can make back 100. If you go to 250, you go to 350, and you don't have huge names attached, or if you don't have a whole lot of marketable elements, you could dig a hole that you can't climb out of. So it's always been under 100, and I try to keep most of my movies under 100. And if you factor in a lot of the discounts I receive on things, you could really see my budgets kind of coming in at around 250. That's what they would be like if I was being charged full rate for a lot of things.
And so 100, sorry, for the entire production, including post and deliverables and prints and advertising and all
Yes.
that? Okay. And were all those films profitable that had financiers attached?
I would say that in the beginning, no. They didn't. They became more profitable after I got them back and after I marketed them myself. The reason being is this, and that's why I just gave a one word answer of no. And the reason is because earlier on, I thought if I give my film to a distributor, then that distributor is going to market my film, they're gonna sell it all over the place, and then I'm just gonna rake in a bunch of money and it'll be awesome. And that's not really what happens. A distributor basically places your film, and if no traffic gets driven to those places, you don't make any money. So ultimately, it's your job, your responsibility as a filmmaker to drive traffic to that film, or to drive traffic to those places where it can be purchased, right? Or rented or whatnot. So if you're not doing that, you're not making money. And back in the day when sales agents really mattered, that sales agent could take the film and sell it here and sell it there and sell it there. But nowadays that doesn't really matter unless it's a huge film or it has a very huge name attached. Even those things don't matter. So you have to understand not only that it's your responsibility to do so, but you have to also understand how to accomplish it, how to drive traffic to those places so that you make money. So no, when those films were released, they were not profitable then, but they are profitable now.
So it's not just enough to get a distributor to put it on iTunes or Google Play or whatever. You've got to have a plan in place to get eyeballs to go to those links.
Correct. That was one of the biggest lessons I had to learn. And not only learning that was my job, but figuring out how to do it. Because it can be very tricky. It can be very tricky because the amount of films that are out, that are constantly coming out, is just crazy. And if you think about it, as filmmakers, most filmmakers think, oh, this person's in the film, and all these people know other people, and everybody's talking about my film amongst each other. Oh man, I'm doing it. It's huge. And it's like, no, because you're just talking to other people in the industry. And yeah, everybody else in the industry is talking about it, but they're really not your audience. And they're really not the people who are going to make your film a success. They're not, unfortunately. The audience is. The people who you're marketing the film to in terms of a paying audience who that's their interest. Those are the people who you want to be aware of your film. Those are the people who you want talking about your film. And as I began to notice it more and more, I even took my own personal Facebook page down. I took it down because for what I was doing, it was worthless and it was a waste of time. Because everybody who I knew worked in the industry and we all pumped each other up and, oh, you're awesome. And that stuff doesn't matter. That stuff does not pay the bills. Pumping each other's ego up is That's all it's doing is pumping each other's ego up. So I got away from that completely and just started really focusing on how do I find my audience and how do I keep them engaged? And then how do I best convert that audience to a paying audience? How do I best do that? And those were things I just learned along the way.
So maybe your audience, let's say, would be the people that would attend a horror convention in Middle America, rather than people on either coast that are also looking to be cast.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
But unfortunately, and you don't know it really on like when you're on a social media platform like Facebook, and everybody's friending you like, oh, my movie's so popular, man. And it's only after you sit back and you look at it that you realize, man, every single one of these people are either actors or composers. Like, what is this? Like, I got 7,000 friends, well, 5,000 friends, and 4,800 of them are other actors and composers. You know, like that's the list of, and that's not my audience. That's not who I'm really looking to convert. You know, those are the people who I'm looking to keep engaged. They're already engaged because they're looking for work, you know? So, you know, I had to learn how do I find my audience and how do I keep them engaged? How do I keep them happy? And I really started to notice when I got Axeman back and I just kind of put out a blurb about it. Guess what, guys? I got it back. And then everybody was like, oh, that's awesome, blah, blah, blah. And what are you going to do now? And, oh, I'm going to re-edit it. Oh, you're going to re-edit it. How's it going to be different? And people were actually really engaged. And we had a lot of back and forth. And I had people writing me, you know, I always thought this should have happened in the movie. And I'm like, we already shot it. It's like, I'm re-editing, but I'm not going back and reshooting things. You know, it's been a while. I think everybody's aged at this point. But, you know, just looking to go back and re-edit it and get it closer to the vision that I had for it. And they were just so excited and engaged. And when the movie came out, it was instantly great. I mean, it was instantly profitable. And one of the coolest things about it was I didn't even release it for people to rent or purchase. I released it directly to Amazon Prime and Tubi TV. And that was it.
Just those two platforms?
Just those two platforms. Now, it's since expanded, but just, I would even say, even if you remove Amazon from the equation, which, you know, if most filmmakers haven't, they should, in terms of AV or in terms of SVOD, you should remove that from your overall vision of how much money the movie's going to make, and really focus on places like Tubi, because that's where I would say 95% of the revenues come from, has been from Tubi. And
with Tubi, are there forced ads?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you have to watch the ads.
Sure.
You have to watch the ads. And I think every movie, it starts with like 2 or 3 ads, and then it goes into the movie, and then a few minutes in, it's another 4 or 5 ads, and then it goes. And so if you keep people engaged, if you have quality content, you keep people engaged, each time they pass one of those commercials, you're making more money. And so, you know, that's the name of the game, is AVOD for certain movies, Now, if you have a movie like, you know, like my most recent film, 1-to-1, if you have something like that where you have, you know, a couple of names that are in the movie that people recognize, that's something you want to really push and see what TVOD has to offer, transactional video, because the odds are a lot of people will go there to rent or purchase that film because they recognize those people and because the content may be something they're interested in.
Did you use an aggregator to get it on Tubi or Amazon Prime or these other, you said with the with the Wants and Want, you put it on other...
With the smaller films, I go through FilmHub, actually. FilmHub is a great resource because I think for most people, the barrier to entry is too high from going with a traditional aggregator, because they're going to charge you per platform. They're going to, first of all, have a set fee, and then any platform after that is another fee and another fee and another fee and another fee, right? Now, if you anticipate, and when I say anticipate, I don't mean hope, but you've actually done the homework, and you anticipate making I don't know, 500 grand, right? I'm just going to use that ballpark figure. If you anticipate making 500 grand from your film and you went through an aggregator, then you paid them up front. So that's all they got. So if you paid them up front and it was $2,500, then that's all they got. And you got all the rest of that money. But if you went through FilmHub, you didn't pay anything up front. They take, I think it's 10%. So if they're taking 10%, then they took $50,000, which is huge. But if you anticipate, because you've done the research and you know films in your certain budget range, they maybe only hit a certain number, and you know that you're gambling anyway, then FilmHub is better because there's no real barrier to entry. You can just put the film in, see how it does, and let's say you crap out at 10,000, right? Game's over. It's made 10,000, and from now it's petering out. Then you didn't spend anything to get into the game. And if FilmHub takes their percentage, they've only taken $1,000.
Is there a period of time when the film kind of peaks, or it depends on the title? In terms of like viewership, is it the first month?
I think it all depends. I think it depends on how you've promoted the film, or if you even know anything about promoting, because I didn't in the beginning. And I know my film came out and I know people were watching it, but I had no idea how they were watching it. I never sent them anywhere to watch it. It grew a following, but I don't know how much of that was from them finding the actual places where it was being shown and watching it through there, or just watching a pirated link. I would have no way of knowing, because I never invested the time in understanding how to market to an audience. So I didn't have that information at my disposal. But as I moved more into understanding the marketing of a film, I can say that I usually will feed that audience, engage that audience, and then point them to where I need them to go. And I can watch the film through every quarter. Actually, with FilmHub, because you can piece out the rights. You can take the rights and do this by yourself, and then FilmHub only handles this. But of everything I'm seeing, I can see it month by month, what's happening, and see how much money I'm generating, how many views I'm getting month over month. And I usually find that in the first quarter, that's where you get the larger number of people viewing your film, because that's when it's still hot. That's when it's its most exciting and everybody wants to watch it and see what happens. And then it starts to kind of find a little medium, and it rides that probably for another 2 quarters.
And when you say piece out the rights, what does that mean? Meaning you own it in perpetuity, but then they own it for certain time, certain amount of uses?
No, actually, FilmHub doesn't. You're licensing it to them, but it's for no predetermined amount of time. So at any moment, you can just stop it. You can say, you know what, I'm not liking this anymore. I'm just going to stop it now.
Okay.
And you can choose to do so. And what I mean by piecing out is, if you're going to, it's different now, but in the beginning, if you wanted to keep Amazon rights for yourself, because ultimately, why would you want somebody to upload to Amazon when you could do that yourself? So for a lot of people, they kept the Amazon rights themselves, and then they would put the rest of the platforms on FilmHub, and then they would make all their money that way. And so as Amazon has moved away from allowing direct uploads for Prime, they've moved away from that recently. So I say recently like it was just now, but I think it was beginning of 2021. They moved away from that model. So yes, you can upload your film and it can be TVOD for rent for purchase, but it won't go to Amazon Prime unless it was put up by another distributor or an aggregator.
Really? Do you know why they did that?
The rumor is that it was because so much of Prime was cluttered with not that quality content. Because people were saying, oh, it's a feature film, and really it was just a bunch of episodes of something they put on YouTube, like, what was one of the ones that was like a tutorial on something like nails and stuff or something, and they just put together a bunch of episodes and it equaled out to like 45 minutes, and then they just uploaded that, and now that's considered a movie. And so I think Amazon they got enough backlash from that, and they decided, it's not worth it for us to allow people to do that. Now we need somebody curating that content. I think that was part of it. I think the other part of it too is ultimately Amazon creates their own content. And so even though I know a lot of people think that we're not really in competition with Amazon because, they have these huge, big shows that are watched by hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people. We're not competing with that. And essentially, yes, you are. You just, not you by yourself. But if you and him and her and we all got together and there was 1,000 films that hit Amazon Prime, if you add up all the people watching that content, it is rivaling their shows. It's taking attention away from the stuff that they've created. So I think it's those two reasons in tandem that really pushed them to make that decision and say, you know what, I think let's put an end to this. Let's make it a curated thing where at best, they're going to have to go through Film Hub, and I think so many people still don't know about Film Hub. And I think if you knew about Film Hub as an independent filmmaker, you would never rely on another predatory distributor again. You never would, because you realize they're completely inconsequential. You can give your film away to this guy over here who will make money off your film and you'll never see a dime. Or you can do it yourself and put it on Film Hub, and chances of you seeing money is far greater. It would keep people out of making some really bad deals with distributors with bad intent,
And do they have certain specs that they require? Aspect
Film Hub?
ratios? Yeah.
Yeah. They do specify the formats that you must submit, and they do specify, how many moments of black, that you can have, so that the films are pretty uniform. So you're not having more than 2 seconds of black at the beginning and not more than 2 seconds of black at the end, that sort of thing, just so that movies start, because I know there are people who try to pad things out and, if I throw on 2 minutes of black at the beginning and 5 minutes of black at the end, my movie's now 83 minutes. So I think they try to do that, but ultimately it's just something to keep it uniform.
Why have you put your films on Tubi?
At the moment, it's probably the greatest revenue generator because people get to watch it for free. It's a free app that's in pretty much, I would say, almost every English-speaking territory, and even some non-English-speaking territories. So it's widely available, just as much so as Amazon Prime. And it runs off ad revenue, so it's completely free, unlike Amazon Prime, where you have to have a membership, whatever you pay per year, your annual membership. With Tubi, you just download the app to your phone or to the computer or to your television, and you're able to watch films completely for free. It's just all the revenue is generated from advertisements. So.
We recently heard that a filmmaker said that he made like 6 figures from Tubi. Can you tell us your experience?
6 figures? Yeah, definitely possible. I think it depends upon a lot of factors. I don't know if this filmmaker did it on one film, because that's a different set of factors, versus he just had a bunch of his films on there and that's a different set of factors. But depending upon the factors, yeah, certainly. All that really needs to happen is that you drive an audience that you've been interacting with to Tubi. The only pushback I would say I received in terms of why someone hasn't viewed a film of mine on Tubi was just that they didn't know what Tubi was. They didn't know how much it was going to cost, so they didn't bother to download it. That's the only thing. I think that as more people become acquainted with Tubi, I think that's going to be the place to go to place a film. And I've actually been in talks with them so that I don't have to go through an aggregator in order to place films there, because all they really want to see is that they're not dealing with a filmmaker who has one film. They want to deal with someone who has multiple films, so that they aren't just dealing with one-offs of having to have different bank accounts to pay or whatever. So that's why they deal with aggregators. That's why they deal with distributors, because they're just paying one person for a lot of films versus one-offs.
So you don't have, let's say, a dashboard within Tubi that you can go and see what you made for this quarter?
I don't have it because I don't have a direct relationship with them yet, but I'm about to have a direct relationship with them. For right now, I see all of my revenue projections from FilmHub.
Oh, okay, great. Why do you place such an emphasis on owning your own movies?
I believe that that is the only way to operate with any type of freedom in this industry. To be tethered to a committee, to be tethered to someone who holds the purse strings, it just, already this industry, you have to have a thick skin already. And it's an artistic industry. It's not like it's, being an accountant or something. It's actually you relying on your own creativity and your ability to take what's ever in your head and apply it in reality to make it come true, right? You're trying to do all these things, and ultimately you have so many people around you that could be, whether it's negatively or positively, influencing that and manipulating it. And they don't mean to. It's not like, I don't think many people are out to just screw you over with bad ideas. I think that everybody just wants their own thing. They want their own imprint on whatever it is. And it really hampers your freedom and your ability to grow. But if you were able to finance your own projects, and you were able to understand the distribution process so that you understand how much money you generate from that, then you've taken so much of your own financial freedom and your creative freedom into your own hands. That's why I really emphasize owning your own rights, and I don't even license my stuff out unless I know that this person can do something that I can't do. And even then, I'm only licensing the rights to them for the things that I can't do on my own. And that's it. Because I know that if I license it to them for, 2-3 years, that's 2 or 3 years that I'm tied to them on this specific thing. And if I learn how to do that during that time, I can't even do anything about it because they're already doing it. So I have to wait until their license is up before I can do it myself, because I like holding me accountable. I like making myself responsible, because that's the only way I know for sure 100% that it will get done, and get done to the level that I would do it, or that I want it to be done. So in all of this, what I'm trying to do is take all of my projects and use them to not only express myself artistically, but also to provide my own security moving forward,
How do filmmakers continue to make movies if their films aren't profitable?
They can't. Not from any standpoint. You can't do it if you rely on investors, and you can't do it if you're relying on yourself financially. The best thing that I can ever recommend is, that's why I always give before I tell someone, oh, make it yourself, I tell them to learn distribution and learn what your specific film, what on average does that film kind of make based on a number of different factors. And then you try to stack as many of the marketable elements into your film as possible, so that while you're being free creatively to create whatever you want to and to finance that, you've stacked a certain number of things in your favor to make it profitable. If not for you, for the person that invested in the film,
How does someone really learn distribution, though, without really having gone through sort of the school of hard knocks with it?
That's the catch-22. I think that everything that you learn about, if you watch a video and someone explains to you, this is how everything works, and That's how it worked when they made that video, because it's already changed. Things that worked in 2014 don't work today. They just don't. Because as equipment has become cheaper and the ability to market the film has become more democratized, more people have started making films than ever before. Now, anything that you've learned leading into this period of time, you've been able to build upon. But if you're now watching things back then about how the industry works, you are so far behind. You're so far behind. The best way that you're going to learn is to take a certain amount of money that you can afford to lose and get in the game. That's really the best way that you're going to learn it. If you've got $1,000, you can make a film. And I'm telling you this because I made a film that's in distribution and it cost me $1,500. And it's on Tubi right now. I think it's on Tubi, which is Adam K, right? That film cost me $1,500. And I have a name in it, you know, Farrah Abraham, who she was #1 trending on Twitter at that time. But yeah, roughly $1,500 is what it cost me to make that film. You can do that and you can get into the game. That's the best way that you're going to learn how to do it. Because trying to gather that information from things online, I think you'll end up being behind the ball when it comes to distribution specifically. When it comes to how to write a story, when it comes to how to cast actors, when it comes to how to produce a film, when it comes to development, when it comes to those things are integral to getting the film going. But the conversation that needs to happen before that is the one that keeps changing, which is distribution. Because all that affects everything else until you get to that point. And that's the part that just keeps changing, you know? So the best way to understand it is just shoot something. Just shoot something. Anything. It's so cheap to do so right now. Whether they have the iPhone, you can plug the little anamorphic lens adapter for $100 on the back of it, and then you're shooting something. Just go do it. Understanding the windows of how to release things is important, you know? But you only learn all of those things after you've distributed something, after you've already invested in it, or you've gotten someone else to invest in it.
So it's like if you're in a flight simulator or you're, let's say, playing some day trading game, unless that's like your real money or you're really flying that plane, you're not really going to learn. I mean, you're going to take more chances and different things. And so when you really have skin in the game, it's different.
Yeah, it's very, very different. It's very different. And I'm going to tell you, it's so funny that when I was making a film by committee with, you know, financiers and stuff, and I would say, I really believe that we should have this in the film and this and it would help, and I would give out all these great ideas, but it was coming from a creative standpoint, right? And at that time, I hadn't really learned about the marketable elements, like why this film needed to be made and why does it need to be made this way. Those were the things I didn't understand, or I should say, I applied all of those questions to the creative part of it and not the distribution part of it. And I had all these ideas and it was like, but if someone had those ideas today and they were asking me about making a movie, I would tell them to stop. Just stop what you're doing right now. I'm going to explain to you why that's not the conversation you should have right now. Right now, you should be defining who is this film for? And don't say yourself. Don't say yourself unless you know a lot of people like you and you know how to reach them. Don't say that. Figure out who your audience is for this movie. Because if you know who your audience is, you'll know what's important to them and you'll know if what you're talking about is important at all. Especially if you have to spend money, because every idea you come up with, all I hear is a cash register. That's all I hear because it's going to cost money in order to do it. So just make sure that it benefits the film somehow financially. And if you've got enough marketable elements, sure, be free. Go off and do, whatever, in mid-sentence, make a wormhole open and the guy gets sucked in and, whatever. I don't know. Whatever it is you're thinking about doing, just make sure that you've done the homework up front to define your audience, because that's ultimately what's going to matter.
Are you able to know the exact moment, like let's say a film is paused and rewatched, or where people drop off with your movies? Do you know it to that much? The analytics are that strong for you?
Yes and no. You know it through Amazon. You don't know it through the others. And that's only because you're going through an aggregator. That aggregator has that information, but they typically don't share that information. But if it's Amazon Prime, you can definitely see where people are falling off. and you'll sometimes rack your brain wondering why at this moment? And you go back and you look and you can't see it. But there are things where people they fall off for whatever reason. But yeah, you can see it. You can see it. I think, in all honesty, that's how, I don't know if this is bad to talk about or not, but with Netflix, people have started to become a little bit disenchanted with the content sometimes, right? And they always say, it just seems like there's no real connection and da-da-da-da-da. And I said, well, there may be a reason for that, because they can see the analytics and they can see when something drops off. Maybe they think they know why. And they go back and they look and they're like, oh, I see. Because before that, this brunette was in it. And she walked through and then she left the scene and then people stopped caring. So that's what we need. We need more brunettes, or we need more hers, or whatever. That's what it was. They don't know, but they think they know because they have the analytics and they're looking at it and trying to dissect it and figure out what any of it means. And they're doing it to such a granular level that it's got to be maddening. But I think that's what they're doing. I think they're using that same stuff to try to figure out how to make movies that keep people engaged more. Because ultimately that's why it exists, is for you to see and for you to know that people are falling off.
Do you think making a successful independent film is like winning the lottery?
It depends on your definition of success. I mean, if your definition of success is you made a movie for 10 grand and it made 10 million, that's definitely a lottery ticket. I don't think that there's any way that person planned to do that. But my definition of success is, how much closer did I get to the vision that was in my head when I was making the movie? How much closer did I get? Did I get closer this time than I did last time? Because then that's a success for me. At one day, I want to be able to look at a film and say, I got exactly what was in my head. Because pleasing this guy or this lady, whatever, like that's not really what I'm making films for. What I'm making films for is to get closer and closer to the movies that are in my head. I want to get all the stuff that's in here on a page and from a page on the screen, and do it in such a way where I didn't compromise too much. I didn't compromise too much. If your success is who you got to be in the movie, or who saw your movie and reached out to you. I think Quentin Tarantino was trying to make Reservoir Dogs as a short film, and his success is that he made it to, I want to say he said he made it to Harvey Keitel or somebody, and that person was like, "Are you crazy? This should be a feature," and that's a success. You were going to make something small and then it became huge. That could be a success. It all depends on what your definition of success is.
So that vision, it sounds like, has always been there, because when you went to that one investor who said, here are my notes, and it's my way or we don't make this thing, you knew that, no, I really want what was in my head to be on that screen. This isn't going to work for me.
Well, I would say it wasn't as strong back then. The only thing I knew was that his notes or his new scenes didn't fit the film. It just didn't fit the film. Like, to give you an example, there's the people go walking off to go look for this guy. And he wrote in a scene where one of the characters, this lady pulls up in a Jeep, and they're like, "Oh, how'd you go back and get the Jeep?" And she's like, "Well, my father used to race, Jeeps back in the day through the desert." And like, what does that have to do with anything? It was the most useless piece of backstory. And why would they have a vehicle? If they had a vehicle, then they could just leave. Like, it opened the thing for like why it doesn't make sense in this film. And that was the reason why I didn't want it in the film. Not because it wasn't part of my vision, but because it just didn't fit in the film. And none of the things that he wrote fit in the film. Now I would say if someone comes to me and they can give me very sound advice. I had it on the previous film where somebody came to me and they said, I don't really get this. And then we talked about it and I realized, wow, from a really objective sense, your idea does work better than my idea, And so we took that idea and incorporated it into the film. So I'm not so much about being so vain as to say my way is the only way, but I believe there should be one voice. That one voice should ring very clear throughout the film. And along the way, because it's a collaborative process, there'll be times when someone will have advice for you that really makes that moment way more honest than the one you created. And you have to take that advice. As the voice, you know that advice is good, sound advice. But it can't just be shoved into the film because this guy said so. Because it can really take people out of the film.
How many screenplays have you written?
I have lost count. I have lost count. More than 50. More than 50, I can say that.
Feature screenplays or a mixture of shorts and features?
No, those will be all features. Mixture of features, mixture of pilots,
When did you write your first feature screenplay?
Maybe about 18, 19. And it was called Audacious was the name of it. And nobody understood, like, what is this? And I had to explain what audacious meant. And but it was a vampire script. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And you were in Georgia at the time?
I was in Georgia, yeah.
Okay.
And I think at that time I hadn't learned the importance of titles, Titles have to be strong and understandable and have sometimes a couple of different meanings. They can't just be self-indulgent, And everything I wrote had some weird thing that I'd learned. But that was by far the weirdest title I think I came up with, which was Audacious.
What does it actually mean?
To live vicariously through someone or something like a parasite.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Codependency?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. And that's really what it was about this vampire needing this guy to come to fruition,
Interesting.
to come to be.
What was your writing process like on that first screenplay?
Making sure that the names were indented properly and, making sure spacing was appropriate and the proper font was being used. It was so much still a learning process of just what went into writing a screenplay. From a formatting standpoint, not a story structure standpoint. So at that point, I hadn't even gotten really into the craft. It was still very much just, how do I make this look professional? So.
How long did it take you to finish that screenplay?
5 days.
Oh, wow. Okay.
5 days. In the beginning, I wrote screenplays in a week or less. Because I didn't know what I didn't know. Like, once you understand what the craft really is and how you move an audience the way you need to move them, how do you get out information without it being very convoluted or heavy-handed? How do you get information across both in text and subtext? Like, once you start getting into that and story structure, it complicates things, and there's no way that you're writing a script in a week. And if you do, and it reads very well, I'm impressed. I'm impressed because it's a lot of work that goes into it. Just in terms of just outlining takes me about a week or more. Just outlining it, just to understand what's going on in a very like one page kind of way. It takes a while. So back then I didn't know that. So when you don't know what you don't know, you plow right through it and you're like, I'm done. And you drop it on the desk. And for some reason, I think it's all because the industry was so new to Georgia in the late 90s, early 2000s, like late 90s really. And that's where I really started to, get a lot of work, and I'm turning in stuff. That agent, I knew that he'd certainly represented other writers, but I don't think he ever represented anybody who was successful. Because there's no way you could if you were receiving those kind of screenplays and just being like, whoa, whoa, that's awesome. There was no structure. I look back sometimes on some of the things I've written, like, what was I thinking? And it's just because you didn't know. You don't know what you don't know. And so you're constantly learning every time. And especially when you seek knowledge and you don't have that vanity to believe that you're the best at something. I never believe that I'm the best at anything other than being me. That's really it. And I'm even sometimes struggling with that, right? So I'm constantly looking at ways to improve. And as I began to understand story structure and stuff like that, my stories got better. But it took a while for me to get to the place where I am now, where I feel as though I'm creating very complete stories, where you don't feel at the end like, what? No, I'm just missing something. I just can't figure out what it is. I feel like my stories are very complete now. I feel they tell a complete story, and all the arcs are completed, and they're completed skillfully. I'm always just looking to figure out how to write a better script the next time. How do I write a better script the next time? And then I start, okay, I did this last time. What do I improve? But what didn't I know that I know now? And that's how you continue to grow. But back then, script in a week was nothing.
Do you think it would have helped if you had this delusion where you thought your thing was the greatest or your writing was the greatest? You know how some people, they're able to convince everybody to that somehow? I don't know.
I know people like that.
Yeah.
I know people like that. And and don't get me wrong, I don't mean I know people like that who don't work. I know people like that who are working. And some of the conversations I've heard have been hilarious because this person has, I think in the arts, because it is so personal. Even if it's supposed to be business, it's really personal. You create something, it came from you, you birthed it, right? And then to hear somebody look at 2 pages and go, that's garbage, what else you got? You either have to be able to accept it and say that's not for them, or you become calloused and you develop a sense of an inflated ego. And I think that if you develop the inflated ego, which I think is the go-to, you start stunting your growth. As a matter of fact, I'd venture to say you start regressing. Because when the going gets tough, you're going to fall back on the things you know, and you've never bothered to learn anything new. You're just going to fall back on the things that you think have worked. And I see that a lot in the industry. I don't think that's helpful at all. I think it's to your detriment. Oh, and when I say detriment, I don't mean detriment in terms of your marketability. I mean in terms of your true ability to grow and become your best you. I think it's detrimental.
With Audacious, did you ever try to sell it?
Yes, sadly. The agent did try to sell it, and he tried very hard. And I don't blame anybody for not buying it. As a matter of fact, I have told this to everyone, including my mom, who thinks I'm the absolute best. I told my mom I'm absolutely over the moon that nobody took me seriously in the beginning. Because if they had, and I had made any of the number of screenplays that I had written in the past, in the very beginning, they would have laughed me out of here and I would have never got another job. I think I would have never reached a point where I felt as though I could take, my career into my own hands. I never would have gotten there because I think at that age, if that happens to you, you're done. I think you're done. If somebody cuts your legs off at 20, I think your legs are just gone. I think you don't have the stomach for it. I see too many people that come to LA and they think they're gonna be, and then they get their legs cut out from under them and they go back to where they came from. And they are no longer interested in the business at all. So I'm very fortunate that nobody took me serious except that one agent. Very serious. I mean, I think everything happened exactly how it was supposed to. On the one assignment that I was sent out on and taken seriously, and it was through a sample, not from me writing anything for that specific pilot. It was just from a sample of my writing in general. And that's how I was on, Young Americans. But can you imagine if they had have wanted a submission, like a TV show I'd written and I submitted something and was like, yeah, here, take a look at this. Get out of here. That's what would have happened. I was too green. I didn't know enough. So.
Can you take us all the way through your writing process?
It's changed a lot. Before, I think my writing process was more, I had an idea and then I wanted to take a really good look at the two main characters and then branch off from there. And I would always write like random scenes. Like these are the must, have scenes in the script because that's what ultimately made me think about the story. I carried that with me for a while, but now it's not so much that. And it's because I've made enough films where I know what goes into making one and just starting at the writing standpoint. So now I only write stories that wake me up in the middle of the night and make me go grab my laptop. If it doesn't make me do that, I don't write it. If there's something that happens and I'm like, you know what, that's it. I got to sit down and I got to nail this. And the reason is because, as we've spoken about before, that passion. If what you have in here it doesn't wake you up in the middle of the night for this project, then I don't know how possible it is. Like you're gonna have to fight so hard to make it to the end. So for me, it starts with, does this thing wake me up in the middle of the night? Is this the only thing I can think about right now? And if it is the only thing I can think about, what am I thinking about right now? Why do I want to write this? What is it saying about me? And I start with that. And then what I do is ultimately something is going on around me that's making me feel this way. And oftentimes it's music. So then that song is on repeat, 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 repeat. I'm writing a story right now called Moon and the Stars. And it's a story about love, but not romantic love. I mean, there's romantic love in it, but it's more about the real concept of love. Like when you really love someone, what you're willing to do for them. What does it really mean for you to really love someone? And believe it or not, I can't get this story out of my head. And we've already set it up to start production in 2022. The song that I have on repeat is, what is the guy's name? Weekend. And his song, Save Your Tears. I don't know if you've heard that song, but I just have it on repeat. And I just write and I write and I write. And I'm just so obsessed with the story. I'm so obsessed with the character's journey. And at every time I stop, because I always say, find the perfect scene and stop. And then when I stop, I go back and I think about all the technical stuff, and I start to make notes for myself. Okay, when you go back to rewrite, make sure you think about this and think about this and think about this. And then when I sit down the next day to write it, that song goes on. And by the way, I don't know if this is a thing for every song, but on YouTube, you can search the song and loop. And then it'll come up with somebody who's made like a 2-hour loop of the same song over and over and over. And I just hit play and I know what the objective is for every scene. So I sit down, I'm looking through my notes and I'm like, okay, this is my objective for today. I need to do this for these previous scenes, and then the new scenes have to be about this. It has to be a point to every scene. I can't just sit down like I did before and just write a scene and hopefully some way find some sort of some kind of connective tissue for the rest of the story. I have to know the point of the scene and who's making the point and why is this person the best person to make this point? Or why is this event the event that needs to happen now? and that's how I kind of structure each scene. But I go back and make sure it fits the story as a whole. And I just do that all the way through.
When you say that what if it wakes you up in the middle of the night, are you already up for something else and then you're like, you know what, this one part, I've just got to write this down? Or how does that work? Let's say it's 2 a.m. on a Tuesday and you just happen to wake up. What's your process? Are you going to a laptop?
It all depends. It all depends. If I am trying to not wake up the cat or my wife, then it's going to be going into the living room where, my office is and, sitting down at the computer and just, But then there'll be times where maybe I get hit with inspiration at 6 a.m. 6 a.m. and the sun's probably starting to come up. It's okay if I grab the laptop and, from the bed, so I'll do it that way. But usually I feel something and I have to get up and I have to write and I have to complete this script. And it only happens now because I think I've allowed myself to surrender to whatever that thing is inside you, that intuition that tells you now's the time. I think that someone said a while back where, writing is a profession and you have to sit down at the keyboard at a certain time and then you get up from that computer at a certain time because it's your job to write, it's your career, and you're professional. That's okay. I get that. But if you are a person who you have multiple films in various stages of production, maybe 9 to 5 isn't something I can do because I'm still editing this one. I'm still handling the promotional stuff for this one. I'm doing interviews over here for that one. I can't just sit at a computer from 9 to 5, right? So I write when the inspiration hits me. And oftentimes it is in the middle of the night. It's in that moment where you kind of wake up or you're about to go to sleep, that little area. I don't know what it is about that time, but it's like, there it is. And then you just, and you punch, you sit there and you punch the keypad until you get it out of your system. You purge it out of your system. And then you go back and you read it and you make sure you got everything. Okay, I get everything? Okay, cool. Let me write my notes. And that's just my notes for what to do when I come back to it. And how does it tie back into the rest of the story? Just making sure that it stays fresh. Because when you get that feeling and you put it on paper, you sometimes forget certain details. So I make sure I want to write it down and then I go back. But yeah, I believe that you have to surrender to that urge, that desire to get up right now because you feel that this needs to be on the page at this moment. I don't believe that's something you can force. My best writing has been when I felt that urge.
Are you sensitive to the moon?
I don't know.
Oh, okay, because it's called Moon and Stars or whatever. So
It's Moon, M-U-N-E, and Stars, S-T-A-R-R-S.
Okay,
and
it's a moon really was affecting you or something.
Yeah, no. It's funny. It's a story that when I describe it, people go, well, where's the love story? But it's a story about this 1842, this child, 6-year-old prodigy from Beijing, and she's taken through a portal by this guy named Igun and the Order of Fanu. And they take her to a place where love wilts and hope goes to die. And they take her here, and then the story picks up in this day and age. And there's a guy who's going through a breakup, and he's trying desperately to get back with his fiancée. And he's been having these visions since he was a kid of, various catastrophes. And this one girl is always in his dreams. And one day, when he's just at his bottom, the portal opens up and she comes through. And she tells him that he's the only, the Egon and the Order of Fanu are coming to basically destroy life as we know it, and you are the only hope. And the guy who's had no desire to do anything in his life other than be with this woman over here, now has a new mission in life. And ultimately, the woman that he is in love with, who just doesn't want to be with him right now, she's also enlisted to help him in this fight to save the universe. And throughout all of it, what he has to learn is what is love truly, because love, he thought, was showing someone how much you want to be with them so they'll want to be with you. But truly, it's having enough love for this person to only want the best for them, even if the best for them isn't you. You know, that's all you want, is you want to see the best for this person. And that's the lesson that he's trying to learn throughout this movie. And that's ultimately the lesson that helps him to be successful at saving the world and the universe.
Wow.
But in all of that, that just came from, I don't know what it was. Something happened, and it just made me evaluate love and what we think of it as people, even healthy people, like what we think about love. And I was just like, man, so many people have it so backwards. So backwards. They love a person because of how the person makes them feel. And it's like, that's not love. That's, it's something, but it ain't love. And that's what really wakes me up is, whenever I find some other example of it, and I'm like, oh, why isn't that in the script? And then it's like, oh, and then this person does this and this event happens, and I'm just constantly jumping up in the middle of the night or early morning and plugging in more pages. And it's all coming from a place of passion, but also truth and honesty, which I believe truth and honesty are two very different things. But it's coming from a place of truth and a place of honesty, and building this story. And those are the stories that I'm trying to tell now versus how I used to tell stories. I used to tell stories, it was very stream of consciousness, and it was whatever it was supposed to be, and then it was done. And now I put more thought into making sure the stories are just honest. They're coming from an honest place. Even if you don't agree with the message, even if you don't agree with the characters, it's coming from a place of honesty.
Yeah, I was wondering what is the difference between writing honesty and writing truth in your screenplay?
I think truth is a fact. Honesty is the feeling. I think honesty is your intent.
Okay.
I've met many people who are super honest, but their facts are so screwed up. That is not the truth. That is not what happened. But you can tell a person truth and not be honest also. You can tell facts and omit certain things that don't fit your narrative, and that's being dishonest. Yet, you're still being truthful.
Okay.
So.
Which would you rather have in a story, truth or honesty?
Honesty. I think honesty in a story is better than the truth. But I aspire to have both.
What has to happen in the first 10 minutes of a horror screenplay?
I think it depends on the genre and what you're trying to accomplish. But I think certainly there should be something that happens in that first 10 minutes that makes an audience realize, holy crap, I'm in for a ride. Something has to happen in that first 10 minutes that gives you that feeling. And if that doesn't happen, I will oftentimes wonder, what were you waiting on? That's just like a friend of mine, he gets on to me because he's way bigger film and TV buff than I am. And he always says to me, like, oh, you stopped watching the TV show too soon. It got really good on the 5th episode. And I'm like, then why did they wait until the 5th episode? Do it from the beginning. I do this for a living. You can do it. Do it from the beginning. I think it works the same way with horror films. If in the first 10 minutes you've not told the audience what kind of ride they're on, then in my book, you haven't succeeded. In my book, you're setting yourself up to fail. So in the first 10 minutes, give them something. Give them something to realize, holy crap, something's about to go down.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be a gory scene. It's just maybe a sense of mystery, a sense of something ominous that's looming.
Yeah, give them something. That's why I say it depends on the type of film that it is, because it can be a film that is gonna make you feel so uncomfortable. So they give you something at the beginning to let you know like what's happening or what the stakes are or something that really pulls you in and lets you know, like, I really need to keep watching this film. If you haven't given them the hook, like what's going to pull them in, I don't know what you're doing really. And that goes really not even just for horror films, but films in general. I think you should give somebody some indication of what kind of ride they're on. Is it going to be the Disney teacups that spin around? Is it going to be, you know, Space Mountain? What kind of ride are we on, you know?
So with 70s and 80s horror, do you think we took our time really making it a little more eerie, a little more suspenseful?
I think people cared more. There's this thing that happens when you shoot film where everybody goes, hey, this is serious, you know? And I feel that's lost now. I feel like people say, you know, if we don't get it right, we'll get it again. We'll do it again, and we'll do it again, and we'll do it again. Nobody takes it really as serious. But even right now, if you tell somebody we're shooting 35 millimeter film and you show up and you plop down the film camera, everybody goes, hey, this is serious. And everybody starts taking it way more serious. I don't know what it is about a film camera that makes everything more serious, but it does. And I think back then that was all you had. You only had film. It was just what kind of film are you going to shoot with, but you only had film. And so everybody took everything very serious. And then too, if you were a small production, you had a limited amount of film. Most of the time you were shooting with a bunch of short ends, whatever. It was very serious and it was very well thought out, and nothing was shot in an extraneous sense. Nothing was shot just in case. Everything was shot with a purpose. And, you know, I think we're missing that today.
Is that why you love the 80s horror genre?
Oh, I love it for so many reasons, but that's one of them. That's one of them. I felt there was a magic in the 80s, you know, and I mean, it came in at the late 70s as well, but there was just a certain magic with the 80s in the way the films entertained while still taking it all very seriously. And still really focusing on the creative and technical aspects, but just really putting that production value out there, making it feel magical, making it feel special. I feel like that's something that I've carried with me in all of my films, trying to make something special, always. Even when it's a shoestring budget, I've tried to find some sort of way.
Are there 5 80s horror films or late 70s horror films that you think every horror filmmaker should watch? Like, you know, Salem's Lot or you know, just any of these Stephen King films?
I mean, my favorite is one that, you know, when people hear it, they kind of go, what is that? But Evil Dead Trap. I think everybody should see that. I want to say it was, I don't know when that one came out. I know it was in the mid to late 80s. And it is a completely insane horror film from Japan. And it was at a time when those movies were banned, especially ones that depicted violence and gore to this extent. I mean, this guy went hardcore, okay? And I remember seeing that where did I see that film? I don't even know where I saw it. It's such a rare film. I forget where I saw it, but I fell in love with it immediately. And I've watched it, I don't know how many times. I had to buy it. And the only way you could buy it in the US was part of a big pack of films where it was Evil Dead Trap, because that's the only one I really, really watch. And then it was another one called like Entrails of a Virgin. Oh yeah. It's just, they're so bizarre, but yet you could tell when the film is made, it's made with love. This guy loved the genre. This was before gore, gross out was a thing. Before, you know, gore, it was, you know, people think about like The Mutilator, that movie, and which not a great movie, but the thing about it was, you know, it had some decent gore. And the positions that they put people in, even when it didn't show it, when it was just implied, you were like, you know. But nobody had taken it to the extent that this guy did. You know, I think his name is, Toshiharu Ikeda is his name. And the visuals of that movie are just so disturbing. But I look at that film as being my top horror film. Ones that influenced me, yes. Now, if you start getting into others that people should see, do you mean like top horror, top just films in general?
Top horror, just
Top
because
horror?
it just seemed like there was a creepiness factor that really
Yeah.
took time to build.
Yeah.
And I really love that of that era, not so much the gore. Not
Yeah.
as much into that.
This one had the gore came in much later, but it did have the creepy effect. Speaking of Evil Dead Trap, it did. If you haven't seen it, please see it. I endorse this film.
Okay.
My name is Joston,
Yes.
and I approve this message. Now, if you're moving away from that, you have to like right next to that put Halloween, the original Halloween. Now that one is not 80s, that one's late 70s. I think that's like 78 or 79. But that's what I meant by late 70s, early 80s, that time period. So I would definitely put Halloween on that list. I think they got busy quick. They let you know what type of movie you were in. They had a summer camp feel, but in someone's house, which was pretty easy. I mean, pretty interesting. I really love that about the film. I think he took his time and he didn't try to rush anything in the film, but you understood in that first 10 minutes what kind of movie you were watching. It wasn't a mystery. It wasn't a mystery. I think once you leave that one, I want to stay more in the more accessible range. So I would say if I'm going with what's more accessible, I would then lean towards your Hellraisers. I think Hellraiser was very creative for his time. I don't think anybody really kind of got into that aspect yet of making who would normally be a villain kind of an anti-hero. So I thought that was pretty cool. That was pretty clever. And from there, I jump into your Jasons and your Freddy Kruegers.
Right.
Yeah.
What about the use, and I don't know if this would be horror tropes, but let's say the late night phone call and no one's there.
Yeah.
Like what are some of the things that are just tried and true that they always work? It doesn't matter what year this is. It just builds an intrigue.
I think that shot from behind. When a person is walking through a house and the camera's drifting behind them and they stop and the camera's slowly getting closer.
Okay.
Because you're like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? I think that always works. And that never gets old. And nobody ever says, well, that's tired. Nobody ever says that because it's just the movement of a camera. I think once you get into actions, that's where it gets, kind of tropey. I think when you get into the late night phone call, I think when you get into the, oh my gosh, it's so hot, let me take my clothes off. And then you see the hand reach in and take the clothes away. And it's like, oh, that's not the killer. That's their friend. It's just like, oh, come on. Like a lot of those things, I think they get really tropey, but I think the camera tricks are the things that don't get old. I don't like the jumpy things. I don't really like those so much. Those are boring to me, mainly because I don't jump. But I like to be creeped out. I like to end a movie and like, oh, should I turn off the light? And I want that feeling. But I think the whole camera moving behind someone. I love Rosemary's Baby when the camera kind of shifts a little and you're constantly thinking something's about to happen to her just because the camera moved a little. I like little subtle things like that. I think those are still very effective. They'll never go away.
Should something scary happen on page 1 of a horror film, or is it better to wait a little bit?
If it fits the story. It's all about what fits the story and what story you're trying to tell. If you get right to it on page 1, hey, bravo. I hope that you don't take your foot off the gas because now you've built up expectation.
Because I think you said in the last question that Halloween, they let you know fairly quickly what was going on. Mm-hmm. Is that something did they maintain it? It's been a while, sorry. So.
Oh, yeah, but mainly because Halloween wasn't a story about a guy in a mask who was just killing people at random. Like that wasn't the story. It was a story of evil, and evil started young, and this kid was full of evil. And so when he grew up and he came home, it was like, what is this guy gonna do you know, and he was stalking Jamie Lee Curtis character, and you always knew it was that sense of it. Did you ever see what was that movie? It Follows. And it was, you know, the girl has sex with the guy, and then the evil spirit starts following her, and if it catches her, it'll kill her, that sort of thing, right? So the thing about it was it moved slow, but it was always present and it was always closing in. So even if it was far behind, you knew you had to stay that much ahead of it, right? You knew. In this movie, Jamie Lee Curtis didn't know. Only the audience knew that he was closing in on her and he was getting closer and closer and closer. And that's where the dread came from. That's why in the beginning of the film, when we see him as a kid and we see him like he's actually going about murdering, you know, his sister and the sister's boyfriend and all that stuff. It was the buildup of this evil that was inside this kid. And he slowly worked his way up to that in those first 10 minutes, right? And then he grew up and now you're watching it play out as an adult. So he set the tone for what the rest of the film was gonna be, and he didn't really let up. All he did was give you someone to care about in Jamie Lee Curtis's character, Laurie Strode. He gave you somebody to care about. And then he said, now watch me butcher her. And then you were so worried for her. You were like, please run, hide, he's right there, you know. And I think he did that very, very well.
Sure, and it would be the same, I guess, in The Exorcist as well, even though the character wasn't stalking her, it was inside of her.
It was inside of her.
She couldn't get it out. Mm-hmm. She couldn't stop it.
Yeah. Right. You set the tone very early with that one. I mean, they set an eerie tone when they were digging up or excavating the thing, and it just felt weird. The musical cues, the zooms, all of it felt weird. All of it felt very, very weird. And they kept that feeling throughout. It just kept you off balance. It kept you really off balance. It made your skin crawl a little bit.
Right. Yeah. It was great. How often have you read a screenplay where nothing happens in the first 10 minutes? No scares, nothing.
All too often. All too often. I think that because the software now can format things for you, and everybody learns about Final Draft or Movie Magic or whatever, they learn about these different programs. It's easy to make your screenplay look professional. It's only when you start to read it do you understand the level of craft that they're at right now, right? And in certain levels of craft, there's always that, oh, we're building to something great. We're building to something great. And that's at a certain level, right? And they may be really good at crafting a story and dialogue, and things may seem okay. But if nothing is happening, and nothing is happening by page 10, nothing is happening by page 15, by page 20. When is something gonna happen? I do read a lot of scripts where I wonder that. Or I wonder, what is the point? What is the point? What are you trying to say? Even if you have nothing to say, what is the point of the film? Who's your hero? What is this person going through? How does going through this change them? How does going through this and them changing help them deal with the true antagonist? You know, all those things, all those questions, they aren't answered because they aren't at that level yet. You know? So you're going to get a mismatch, but for the most part, I would say if I read 10 screenplays, something happens by page 10 in one of them, depending upon which week it is. Not every time does something happen. Not all the time does it. Sometimes it might be 1 out of 20 screenplays.
What if someone says, well, I want to take my time with the suspense? I mean, if you look back at the Stepford Wives, and I realize that's not really horror, it's more like thriller. Mm-hmm. It was a long intro to them coming to this new neighborhood and seeing these wives, and she's kind of confused about what's going on. I mean, it took its time.
Yeah. But the thing about it is it establishes its tone very quickly. And I feel like that's another thing that's missing because so many people haven't found their voice, how they tell a story, right? Because your story may change depending upon whatever genre you've decided to write today. Whatever got into you, like this love story that I'm writing right now, Moon and the Stars. It's people will hear me say it's a love story and they think, oh, romantic drama, and I'm like, actually no, it's a sci-fi. It's a sci-fi. These people are interstellar travelers, interdimensional travelers, time travelers, and they can do this and they can do that. And they're like, but then where's the love portion? I'm like, well, the love portion's here. But it's a completely different thing than I've ever written. Want and Want is a very completely different story than I've ever written. I think that people classify that one as a suspense drama or drama thriller or something like that. So, and that's very different than the horror that I've directed. And even within the horror, I've directed many different types of horror. So no matter what the genre is that you're writing in, you have to at some point have developed your voice and how a person recognizes that it's your film, right? And then once you start to develop your voice, I think it'll help you drastically with maintaining tone of a film. Because your voice is your voice, and it's how you tell a story. And as long as you understand the tone of your own film, you can keep that modulated all the way through. And you can set that at the very beginning. And once you set that tone, like this is where this story takes place in this type of world, you start that from page one. You start it from page one. So yes, nothing may happen in terms of someone getting murdered or whatever. You may not get the horror because it may not be a horror. Maybe it's just a movie that's meant to make you squirm and make you uncomfortable. Maybe that's what it is. Or maybe the story is speaking to, like with Want and Want, it was about a guy who didn't even know himself anymore. So if he doesn't know himself, he doesn't even recognize himself in certain situations. And if you tell him he's done something wrong, he's relying on your truth to tell him he's done something wrong because he doesn't even know right and wrong of himself anymore. And I show that from page one. If you can't even recognize who you are and what you do in the situation when someone tells you to make it better, how can you? He's like, how do I? How do I do it? And the person has to tell him, I think that's something you can figure out. And he's like, I don't think I can. He really can't. It sets a tone for the film. Nobody died. You know, nobody was hunted down in the first 10 pages. I just set the tone for what the story is. And I think that that's, you know, it takes a while before you get to that level of understanding of what you're doing. And then I think now you've gotten to a point where technically you're proficient, you know, but you still have so much more, like so many more levels to climb, you know.
Do you think it's better that someone rushes into a more of a horrific scene or takes their time? Like which is more detrimental to a horror script? Too long to get into the action or too fast?
I mean, again, I think it depends on the point of the story. I think that Scream, which is one of my faves from the 90s, in the first film, it kind of meanders, right? At first. In the first like minute or two, she picks up the phone, she's talking to the guy and making popcorn. Everything seems fine. It seems very casual. It's not until the first kind of slip up that she doesn't hear, that we heard as the audience, that we realize, wait a minute. And then you start to sit forward, right? The story is about a guy who calls you on the phone, he stabs you to death. We didn't see that until, like, it came in probably around the 5-minute mark is when we started to be concerned, right? So in that first 5 minutes, it's like, are we just following this lady? And if you notice, that movie is really, for the longest time, it's a single shot. It's a single shot. She picks up the phone, they pull away from the phone, they're following her around into the kitchen. It's a single shot for a lot of it. And even when they abandon it, they pick it up on another oneer and they're walking around. And it's masterfully done. But it's all about the pacing and the tone. And it slowly becomes more menacing. And once it becomes menacing, it never lets up.
And so again, less about dialogue and more about camera movement.
Camera movement and just really understanding tone. I think, you know, lighting plays an incredible, cinematography in general plays an incredible role in creating tone. your cinematography, your editing, post-production sound, musical cues, sound effect, all that stuff plays a huge role in it. But when you're reading it on the page, when you're on the page, something has to set the tone for me to understand why I should care. And a lot of the times I ask, why should I care very early? I'll ask that on page sometimes 2. I'll ask, why should I care? Now, something may not happen until page 3 or page 4, but I'll be asking myself, why do I care? When I watch movies at home, I'll turn them on. I'll watch for a little bit, but then I'll turn it, because there's so much content that's available right now. Why would I waste time? I treat a movie that I'm watching just like I would a script that I'm reading. I start watching it, and if it's not catching my attention, I have to abandon it.
Yeah, I think it was harder before because there was so little, you couldn't check a phone, you couldn't have one window open and be over here. You had to, you were just like, all right, I'll let it play. You know? And sometimes that worked to its advantage because then it grew on you, but now you have to catch people. And that's why I was asking if you knew the analytics of when people dropped out or if people rewound a scene or something.
Yeah, I don't have it like in terms of analytics from Amazon. I don't have it when someone maybe rewinds it or something. I don't have that, but I do know, I can tell the progression, like people are dropping out. Oh, it stabilized. And then people watched it all the way through here and then it dropped out. Like I can tell that, but I can't really tell, did they pause it and then go do something and come back? Like I can't tell those sort of things. Or did they rewind? You can't really see that. But the thing about it is that I usually will start my films and I try to get them to a point where you don't feel there's a place to jump off because something's always building to something else. And one scene leads into the next very naturally. So I'm constantly trying to do that so it doesn't feel like there's a place to really drop off or you'll feel like you're missing something because something just happened. So now I have to see how that affects the next thing. And I'm constantly trying to keep that momentum going. And I think that that's what you have to do, or what you should aspire to do when you're doing anything. Something, it always has to be building towards something, or what else are we doing? Why would I be investing my time if nothing in your script is investing towards something bigger?
So a bigger character goal or a bigger scare or something with the antagonist?
Yeah, set up your stakes. Give me a character who's interesting, that I care about. Even if you don't want to root for them to succeed, root for them to not succeed. Something. Give the audience something to keep them invested and keep them interested. And it does start with having something in the first few pages, whether it's tone, whether it's an act of whatever that drives the story forward. Give them something that keeps them watching. More importantly, something that lets them know what kind of a ride they're on.
Sure, because even with Hereditary, we didn't totally know. We just knew something ominous was there, and it kind of keeps you on the edge. And you didn't know what was it, though,
Yeah, and the great thing about Hereditary right now is if we talk about Hereditary, the first thing we do is go, Hereditary, we wince just thinking about it, right? But if you go back and you think like, well, what do I remember from the film? I remember there was this like little sibling thing with the brother and the sister. I remember her head hit that pole and it came off. And then I remember he didn't want to, like he just parked the car and went into the house. I remember the thing from him in the classroom where his face kind of, went crazy and he slammed his head on the desk and stuff. I remember that. And then I remember all the stuff that happened at the end with him, with the mother and the father bursting into flames and all that stuff and the mom banging her head on. But we're recalling just these few moments. But the fact is that we made it to the end in complete terror because of the tone of the film. The tone was set very early and they never let up. Even when they had moments where it looked like hope was starting to shine in through the window, it didn't matter. The tone was so dark and ominous and heavy that you felt like, oh. And you felt cold. I don't know if about you, I felt cold watching it, you know? It was such a weird feeling that you got watching that movie, but they kept that tone up throughout the entire film. And that's what I mean is it's finding your tone and staying with it very early. Something that makes people care and make them keep watching.
How much punishment should we put our main character through?
Well, I think somebody described it best when they said what you do to make someone, what a story is people chasing a character up a tree and throwing rocks at them while they're trying to climb down. That's ultimately what a story is, right? And so I think that you should put them through as much punishment as they can weather and still realistically want to pursue their goal and still realistically understand the stakes, you know? One of my favorite shows is The Walking Dead, right? And there was a period in in season 7, was it? 7 or 8? May have been season 7. And people kind of stopped watching it. It went like this. And mainly it was due to how much punishment they put the main character through. He had so much punishment heaped upon him that his only goal was not to receive more punishment, that his people would receive no more punishment. And this was from a character who had been a world beater for 6 seasons, you know, and all of a sudden we're watching him not only be beaten, but to just be beaten to a point where the fight is beaten out of him. And I think people jumped off because that was the point that the punishment went too far. That was the point where audience was like, okay, I'm tapping out. I can't do it anymore. I remember there was an episode where he just stood there, like it was just one locked off shot of him and he just cried and the camera went to a wide shot and he's just completely alone and he's crying and there's a guy who, you know, he just watched be killed that was from his community and the guy turns into a zombie. So it's even worse. Now he's got to after he just witnessed this happen to the guy and he could do nothing about it, he had to turn around and be the person to, you know, right through the brain to put him out of his misery. Like, I think, you know, I still kept watching, of course, because it's one of my favorite shows, but I can understand why people jumped off because at that point, punishment, it went too far. So, you know, I think it has to be enough punishment where it does create the wound that we're all looking for him to heal, but it can't be so much that it makes him forget the goal. The goal was not to receive more punishment. The goal was to keep his people safe and get rid of all threats. And now he's not trying to get rid of the threat. He's trying to live with the threat and he fears the threat. And I think that's too much for audiences to deal with. We have to constantly keep this guy moving forward and working towards his goal while all the time realizing he could probably lose. But we'll root for him if he keeps pursuing his goal.
So it was the fact that we saw the fight beaten out of him, not him being put through the fight.
Well, there was no fight. He was being punished and punished and punished and punished. It was so. Have you seen this season? If you haven't seen season 7, it starts with him on his knees because that's how the season 6 ended, with him on his knees. So it starts with him on his knees and watching 2 of his friends, and he can do nothing about it. They're told, if you move, we'll kill everybody. But for right now, we're just going to kill this one guy in front of you all. And they proceed to beat this guy's head in with a baseball bat in front of all his friends. And another guy can't take it anymore. He gets up and hits the bad guy. And the bad guy says, that's going to cost you. Because now I'm going to beat another guy head in. And he beats another guy's head in. All the while, the leader has to watch this happen and he can do nothing. He starts the season on his knees, watching his friends die, and there's nothing he can do. And then for the rest of that season, he's met with even more punishment and more punishment. And the threat is always, if you don't do what we say and you don't give us what we want, we'll show up and kill everybody. Don't forget that. And it's like, how many times can you see that? And how many times can you see that and the good guy not say, that's it, we got to come up with a plan? His only plan is to make sure there's not more punishment. You can't do that to audiences. They have to see the fight. They have to see the struggle. They have to see you trying to win, not being complacent with being browbeaten, you know?
Would you say the more punishment we put our protagonists through, the better the story's going to be?
To a certain extent, yes. To a certain extent. As long as we don't put them through too much. I think that we have to see, I mean, for my stories, I love to show the person, show their wound, and then show how they've begun to live with this wound by accepting it as a truth, even though it's a false truth, and how their world is with that, right? Now, this person may not be down on their luck or anything, but something has happened and it's told them that this is the way you live life, right? And there has to be something that forces them on their journey. When they start going on their journey, they can't win every little battle. They got to lose, but they got to see that, you know what, but I can see on the other side of it if I just keep going, because these are the stakes and I can't allow myself to lose. They have to take enough punishment along the way where you keep believing in them, even if they don't really believe in themselves. And then it has to get to a point where it's a soul-crushing defeat. Like right when they thought they won, it's a soul-crushing defeat. And you got to watch them pick up the pieces, and that's when you circle the wagons, and you're bringing together all the different people that are going to help you build the character back up and put them back on their journey, because now they realize this is the worst that it can get. This is the worst that this guy can do to me, but the stakes are still the stakes. I still have to stop this thing from happening, whatever it is. Right? So they've absorbed all this punishment and they realize that's the worst that it can get. So this guy cannot hurt me any more than this, only by them succeeding at their goal. So now I'm just going to go straight after them, straight away. Now there's many different ways of what you can do to get them to stop the bad guy, or the bad guy succeeds or whatever. But at this point, that's when the audience is behind them. They've received enough punishment where they have hopefully garnered the sympathy of the audience, and the audience is behind them. So that when they lead them into this final battle, the audience is right behind them, right on the horse, right behind them, like, go, and you're watching this person go in and save the day. Now, if you give them too much punishment, I think the audience can bail, because I've seen it happen. They just bail. I don't think you can watch a person just lose. I don't think you can watch them just lose. They have to have some win somewhere.
What are ways that a writer can create high stakes for their character?
Ooh, it's a good question. It has to be, well, first of all, it has to be something that relates to their wound, right? It has to be some kink in their armor where this makes it personal for them. It has to be that. That's number one. And because overall, the story is about them overcoming that wound, and that somehow tying into this goal of stopping whatever the antagonist is. So, but the stakes have to be high enough where it almost seems insurmountable. So yeah, I believe that, the stakes are very important, but it has to be all relatable to the character and to the audience.
Okay, so if it's something that's too avant-garde, we can't understand it, but if it's just sort of about the basic needs of living, safety, security, then we can relate to it?
I think it can be almost anything. It all depends on who your core audience is. Just to give you an example, for Want and Want, right? If you watch the film, it's very easy to sit back and go, what? I don't really get it. But the story is very meta. It's very meta. There's a story happening, and then there's a story that the writer is writing. But unbeknownst to him, they both are the same story, okay? And in the story that he's trying to write, that he's having writer's block with, the reason why he can't relate is because he's cut so many pieces of himself away to fit in, right? To fit in with this life with his wife, this new Hollywood life. He was doing it before when he was trying to do sales. He's just trying to fit in with everybody, with his friends. He keeps cutting off pieces of himself to the point where he doesn't recognize himself anymore, okay? And he's not honest with himself. Without honesty, and he doesn't know himself, he doesn't even know what he wants. He's writing a script that he can't finish it. It seems convoluted. There's all this other stuff going on. Inside the story that he's writing is about a guy who's robbing a bank. He wants the money. Then there's this girl that he meets inside of the bank. He starts falling for the girl. There's the police outside. The police are going to make him pay for whatever he does, right? If he wants the girl, he has to give up the money because she doesn't like stealing and all that other kind of stuff. If he takes the money, he loses the girl. And all of that, the police are still outside. How's he going to get past that? In both of these stories, it's not even knowing what the guy wants. The guy doesn't know what he wants. He's all over the place, right? And what you begin to realize is for the protagonist in the story, his wife is really related to the money in the story. That's his security. He's so secure with his wife because she's on a soap opera. She makes lots of money. He can be a struggling writer and it doesn't matter. So he has that. And in the movie, that's money, that's security, right? And then he meets this girl named Pia, and he's completely infatuated by her. It's exciting and it's new. Well, that's the girl in the story. It's exciting and it's new. He's always needed money and security, but excitement has taken over. Does he choose excitement? And then, of course, the woman's husband, who's his best friend, is the police. That's the people who are going to hold him accountable. He's gonna have to suffer a consequence, whether it's good or bad. He's got to suffer a consequence. That friend is gonna make him pay. He's making him pay the whole movie. When you're watching, you're just like, gee, you almost consider the friend to be the bad guy until you realize this guy has a wife, but he's infatuated with this other woman, right? And that's the dance that is going on in this entire film. So I look at it and I go, the film may be hard to understand. It may be hard to understand how to relate to it and how this relates to you. But for a specific group of people, they'll understand that desire to fit in and that you don't even know yourself and that you're driven by what you want in the moment. But do you even really want it? Do you know yourself enough to know you really want it? And I think there is a segment of audiences that can relate. But then there'll also be a segment that'll say, I don't even get any of this. And it's because they don't relate to any of it. They just don't. But that movie's not for them.
Sure, or maybe they've seen that in someone close to them, or they used to be that, and then they realize all that's empty. But I see what you mean. Someone that's really conflicted, they want what they want, and they're willing to kind of sell their soul for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good story to write about Hollywood.
It is, and it's him. He's just in the wind because he doesn't know himself anymore.
Sure.
He doesn't.
How long did it take you to write the script?
I started writing it in probably 2017, 2018. I started writing it, but it was one of those ones where I just kind of plugged away at it for a little bit at a time. And then I got to a point where I said, I don't know where I should take this story. And then what happened was I put it aside for a moment and I went off and I did some other work. And it was around that time that I realized, man, the reason why I didn't know where to go with the story was because I was trying to stick a Hollywood ending on it. And it's funny because that's actually a line earlier in the script is that he was saying, he's taking advice from the character Pia, and he says, I can't take that advice because it's not a very Hollywood ending. And she tells him, well, a Hollywood ending all depends on where you stop the story. And so I said to myself, I have to be honest in the rest of the screenplay. I have to be honest and I have to make him have real conversations about where he's headed, where his relationships are headed, where his life is headed. He has to have these real conversations. Now, he can't have them the way that we have them, but he has to have them. and he has to make a decision. It can't be ambiguous. He has to make a decision. And so once I went back into the script with that mandate, I was able to wrap it up pretty quickly. And pretty honestly, and with as much truth as possible.
And did you give the script to many people for feedback?
No. I think feedback is great sometimes, but when it's something that's it was very new for me to be that honest and that truthful and not try to stick Hollywood stuff into it, Hollywood magic to make it magically resolve. I didn't want that type of feedback. I wanted it to exist for what it was.
So you didn't need to get notes from anybody because you self-financed it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you just knew but were there any parts that maybe were unclear that you wanted people to see and flesh out for the characters, or no? You just knew we were going to do it this one way?
I knew I was going to do it that one way. What I did was, once I got actors on board who were very, very talented and they were very outspoken about their own thoughts on it, I was able to just have a conversation with them where I said, there are no wrong answers, okay? But we're just going to sit down and we're going to talk about the script and we're going to talk about the moments and how we can make them honest and very truthful. So let's have those conversations. And like I said, it was very productive because no one was saying, but I think it should end this way, or I think it should. I established very early on, the theme of the movie and where it's headed is not changing. How we get there may adjust a little bit. But where this train is headed, it already left the station and it's headed to this destination. So we all sat down and we said, okay, cool. In these moments, here are things that we can do to make it more truthful and make it feel more honest. And that's really what we focused on. So there were some changes along the way, but for the most part, what was on the page was on the screen, for the most part. I got very, very close. I would say I was 75% there. 75% of what I wanted is on the screen, which is a high number for me.
What do you tell other screenwriters, filmmakers about being too precious about certain scenes that maybe they just don't totally serve the story?
I haven't had to have that conversation. However, that conversation was had with me, and it was had by Eddie Watkins. He told me, he said, your biggest problem is that you're married to everything you do. You can't be that way, especially if you're not the one financing it and directing it. You can't be. Things are gonna have to change for whatever reason, and you're gonna have to be open to making whatever those changes are work. And that's what I would tell anybody who's treating it too precious.
So, because we all want certain scenes or some little artifact in the film, and it means something to us, but the audience might not care.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when people have given you those notes, or maybe it was just Ed,
Mm-hmm.
are you open to changing them, or has it been hard for you?
To take notes?
Mm-hmm. And to remove certain things?
In the past, I would say I was probably more open to removing it. Even if I didn't agree, I'd remove it because I want this issue to die and I don't want things to keep carrying over or whatever. But once I started to just kind of stand up and say, this is my film. Even if you pay for it, it's my film. Because ultimately nobody's gonna say, woo, well, I looked at this movie, that producer must have been great. That's not what they're gonna say. They're gonna say the director and the writer and the cast were great. That's what they're gonna say. And if people know a little bit more about the industry, they're gonna say the cinematographer was great. But what they're not gonna say is, wow, that producer really knows his stuff. That just doesn't happen. And so what happened is that we made the film and we always understood what it was supposed to be. And then as we got further along, people's ego started to get involved. And even though I would explain, I understand that this is great for you, but we're at service to the story, not to you. So the person would relent. And so as we got further into editing, the conversations would come up again. Well, I think we should really add this. And I'm like, well, you're serving your own ego. You're not really serving the story. So no, I don't think we should do that. And so we would go have a little bit back and forth until I would just say, okay, you know what? Just so we can be done with it. And then you would cut it. And before you know it, it was a movie that was, granted, at 2 hours and 15 minutes, it's a bit long. So we cut it down to about maybe an hour, 45 minutes. So now it's cut down. Only thing that needs to happen is color and a little bit of sound work, and it's ready to be done. So I handed off, and ultimately I heard through the grapevine that the film was finished and that it was at an hour and a half. That's really weird. It's really weird.
Something.
And it was because I have to take accountability and responsibility. I handed off the film along with all the footage so that it could have the finishing touches put on it. And what ultimately happened was this person decided to put all these scenes back in and remove all these other scenes so that their work would stand out a bit more. And it was an ego thing, you know? And I said, you know what? I dropped the ball on that one because I gave that person the ability to do it. That was my fault. And it'll never happen again. It'll never happen again. Because that film floats around and people say, wow, that film. And I can't take credit for the good or the bad because it's not my film. It's not. And that was because I started in the beginning. We talked about the TV show 24 and Jack Bauer, and the guy says, you've never done anything bad. You've never made a bad decision. You've never just done this one little thing. And he says, no, because once you do that one little thing, it makes it easier to do the second thing and the third thing. And that one thing that I did was that I compromised, and I did it just so that the conversation would die. I said, and I gave in a little and a little bit more and a little bit more. And then eventually the film completely changed. And I said, I just won't allow that to happen again. If I do work with someone else, the film that they'll receive to do any type of finishing touches, which by the way, I'll do them all in-house so that when I hand it off, it's a finished film. But let's just say that I had to hand it off, they would only get the film to work with. And that would be it. Because it's my responsibility to make sure that, we're honest to the film and what the film is trying to say. We're in service of the film, not to our egos.
We had this comment come in on our channel. Mm-hmm. In a horror movie, only the villain character matters. All the other characters are expendable. Most are going to die anyway. What's your reaction to that?
I don't think that's true. If no one matters, they shouldn't be in the film. If it's only about that villain, then he should be yo-yoing or, doing something else that only requires, him. I think that you're trying to tell a story and every character is integral to that story or they shouldn't be there. Maybe that comes from me working with limited budgets always, and you're constantly saying, why is this person here? Does this person need to be here? Because they're going to impact me as far as scheduling, as far as the budget, And it helps you hone your screenwriting skills better too, because there's nothing extraneous about the script. So to say at any stage that none of these people matter, I think if you're watching the later Friday the 13th movies, if you're watching the later Freddy movies or the later Halloweens, but if you're watching the ones that they started with, you would not say anybody was extraneous in those stories. That's when they were still very creative and they had spent a lot of time working on the script and, they gave a lot of thought towards it. And it was written with love. And when you do that, when the screenwriter loves those characters, there's no way they will be creating people that don't matter. There's no way.
How does a villain in a story reflect the hero?
If you had asked me this a long time ago. Now I say sometimes my villain and my hero are almost one and the same. They have to pursue whatever their goal is with the same amount of passion. I think that one person learns lessons and the other person doesn't. And that's ultimately what does end the villain. And the villain has to reflect whatever it is, or I shouldn't say the villain has to reflect it, but their goal has to reflect something that the hero is trying to work through, so that they can work through, there's a catharsis, you know, as they go through this journey and get to the end and stop this thing from happening. I think that that's the way that it should go, but I think that they should both pursue their goals with the same passion and intensity, because that's what makes for a great villain. I still consider the best villain to be Alan Rickman's character in Die Hard. I think he is the best villain ever, because his goal, you know, is the opposite, but they're working towards the same thing, which is him and John McClane. It's just that they're going about it differently, but they're both after their goals with the same amount of passion and intensity and being clever. They're both very clever. That's the other thing about it. Like both of them are trying to one up the other one and get one over on the other. And that's what's so compelling about watching that story. I think it should be the same with any movie that you're working on. Whoever is your antagonist should be going after it with the same amount of intensity and passion. They should be almost a mirror reflection of the good guy. If maybe they made all the wrong decisions in the past, maybe they didn't make that 51% that Warren Buffett talks about. Maybe they only made the 49% and they weren't successful at certain things.
Should the antagonist be twice as strong as the hero?
No. I think that the villain should always have an advantage. And most of the time, if you think about it, if you using Alan Rickman's character in Die Hard, his advantage was that he already knew what he was trying to accomplish. That was his advantage. He knew what he was trying to accomplish. And because people would say, oh, well, he had the numbers too. He had all these guys with guns. Yeah, but they didn't know who they were looking for. And they didn't know where he was. So that put them at a disadvantage. The advantage that the bad guy actually had, the villain, was that he knew what he was trying to accomplish, and John McClane had to figure it out. So I think, I don't think he has to be twice as strong. He just needs to be ahead of the game, and the good guys playing catch up.
But you say in the end that the antagonist doesn't learn any lessons, but the hero does.
Mm-hmm.
So the antagonist is just all anger. It's all trying to get revenge, but the hero somehow learns something.
Yeah, the hero has to learn something. He really does. The villain, I don't think it has to be about anger. There have been many villains that have done things. I'll give you an example, Moon and the Stars. My villain isn't a guy who's really trying to kill everybody. As a matter of fact, he's trying to save everyone. He's just going about it in a really bad way. What he started to notice, he's been to the edge of the universe and back. He's been to the beginning of time and the end. And what he's seen is that every civilization, every leap, every technological leap they make gets them closer and closer to oblivion. What drives those technological leaps is hope. Hope that things can be better. Hope that this makes the world a better place. Hope that this gets us to here, and hope that this gets us to there. And what we don't account for is what happens when we make those mistakes, or when somebody takes what we were using for hope and they weaponize it. Those are the things that don't get accounted for. So what his idea is to create a machine that it shrinks this limbic area in the brain so that hope dies. The problem is when hope dies, so does ambition, so does love, so does fear. So many other emotions die. And what happens after that is that his project showed success, right? And people had no hope. But then what happened is, whether it was a day later or a month later, people would off themselves. And if they didn't off themselves, they became something different. And it became very much like the Order of Fanu that works with him to do these things. So his goal is not one that's out of anger. It's one that's out of love. And you find out that it's to save the people that he still cares about, because he's seen what happens in the future. So he needs this to work. Now, the good guys know if you do this, it's the same as a death sentence, because it's a ticking time bomb for people just offing themselves, just killing themselves. So he's working just as hard to keep this guy from succeeding. So I don't think it has to be anger or hatred or any of those things. It just has to be a goal that they really believe in, that they've given everything. There is no plan B. There is only plan A. Both people have a plan A. And what do you do when they're about to collide? You know, that's where the drama comes from. That's where it gets interesting. And if your bad guy was only driven by revenge, I've seen it a million times. Driven by anger, you can beat the anger out of somebody. I've seen it happen a million times, you know, get into a boxing ring and this guy is angry. He won't have all that in 3 rounds because he's going to swing for the fences. He'll be exhausted and you can beat the anger out of him and he'll give up because that's all he had was anger. So the most compelling stories come from the people who really believe in their goal and they're willing to die for their goal. What makes the villain fail is their inability to grow and adapt, because adaptation is survival, right? And the good guy figures it out. When they're beaten in that, end of the second act, when they're beaten, they have to pick up the pieces and learn their lesson. And they're like, I still have the same goal. I just got to go about it differently. And the bad guy, thinking that he's won already, when he sees the bad guy show up again, what does he do? The same exact thing he did to win last time. And that's why he loses.
Why is evil important in storytelling?
I think it depends on the definition of evil. I think that sometimes people will say evil is like, oh, they do these horrible things. And like if somebody takes, just as an example, and I'm not defending it all, but let's say they take someone like Hitler, right? And they say, you see all the horrible things he did. It's evil. I go, I think he's despicable. I think the atrocities are evil. But true evil is doing it just because. That's true evil. He didn't do it just because. He did it because he believed this and he believed that and he believed this crazy stuff. And he was like, the only way to do it is to do this. To me, true evil is something that is birthed rotten and it has no reason to exist other than to cause you harm. True evil is terrifying. True evil doesn't need a reason. It just doesn't. Michael Myers did not need a reason. That's what made him so terrifying. Nothing happened to make him stab his sister and her boyfriend to death. Nothing happened. That's scary. I think you very rarely, though, see true evil in movies because it's something hard to capture. It's something really hard to capture. People that just do things because, why not? Those are the things that I think in reality scare the crap out of me. When you hear about this serial killer who you ask, why did you do this? Why not? That's evil. That's terrifying. But it's rarely portrayed very well in films.
How do you create a powerful and meaningful story?
I think it first has to be powerful and meaningful to you. I try to now, as I write, if I'm writing something story I just have to tell, it has to, a lot of the time, speak to something maybe that I'm dealing with myself. And I can work through a lot of it in the script, and I think that's why it wakes me up, because it's something that I'm figuring out, that I'm working through, and I'm working through it with characters. So I think it starts there. It has to be important and impactful for you. And from there, you can begin to shape it so that it's something that is easily digestible for somebody who's maybe not experiencing the same things as you, or, they're not going on that same journey with you. So you want to make it more relatable so that, they can certainly see that journey and take that journey with you.
What if someone asked you to write a screenplay and, for hire, and it's not a story that necessarily you tap into, but you're being paid well, and you say, all right, I'll do it. But you just can't relate to the character, to the story, to the theme, to the tone?
Funny enough, that just happened. And ultimately, long story short, we just couldn't work together. That's just what it was.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The story was just something I can't relate to. And the way I would have to be able to tell the story, that other person who was the financier, they didn't want the story to go that direction. So we were at an impasse, and we both had to say, I don't think this is going to work for either of us, because what you want won't wake me up in the middle of the night. That message is not a message that speaks to me. It's a throwaway message, and I wouldn't want to create something and spend months working on something that I don't believe in. I wouldn't want to do that to myself, and I wouldn't want to do that to someone who's paying me the money to do it. I think it's a bad idea. So yeah, that actually happened to me recently.
And did you know fairly soon into your working with the person that this wasn't going to work? This wasn't going to happen?
I didn't know it early enough. I allowed us to go down the road too far and waste a lot of each other's time. And I normally don't consider something to be a waste of time if I learn a lesson, but I think I understood things far sooner, and I just let it drag on because I believed at some point he would see what I was saying. And as he began to speak with his partners, they would see what I was saying. But unfortunately, much like me, he did have partners, but they were out of the way. They didn't have any influence on the project. So their opinions didn't matter. So we're both people who don't report to anybody. So we both, we had to just shake hands and say, it's not going to work.
That's fair.
Yeah.
It's better that you cut your ties then than actually had it made and it wasn't exactly what you felt.
Well, I wouldn't have been able to write it. I think that when you sit down to write something, you understand that it's a journey, right? And for some people, it's not about the destination. It's just the journey. But I'm constantly keeping both in mind. The journey and the destination, So I know if this is the destination we agreed to get to, this is the best path to tell the story. And if that doesn't work, and I see the alternative as an inferior version to that, then I have to say, I don't think it's going to click. I don't think it's really going to click, because that journey won't be honest. It won't be honest. It's forcing something. And I don't want to say that, but it's just, it becomes like you're just pushing constantly and trying to force a circle in a square hole. And you shouldn't do that when you're writing, especially in the beginning. You shouldn't do that. When you're developing the screenplay, that's when it's fun and that's when it's breezy. And if you can't see the journey in a fun and breezy way, then it's time to kind of cut bait. Don't spend so much time working on it for something it's not going to be fruitful for you in the soul, nor from an experience,
What are your thoughts on creating a meaningful story versus one that's commercial?
I think it all depends on your goals. If your goal is to create something commercial, go for it. I think that there's no shortage of opportunities to create something commercial. There's no shortage of it, because as you can see, that's what's being thrown at most of us all the time. Something commercial that has mass appeal, and I think it's superficial. I think it's easy. You can take the money and run. It's what do they call it? Legal bank robbery. It's, if that's your thing. I think that for a lot of people who are not, for people who are driven by quelling that voice inside, that won't really work. I think you're always going to have to be making something meaningful, whether it's meaningful to you or meaningful to audiences in general, because that's how you feed that thing inside of you, right? That need to get that creativity out. You're creating something that means something to you in that moment. If you are a person who desires to make meaningful material, and you're constantly having to stuff that down while you make something commercial, you're not living your best life. You're not living your best life. And ultimately, that's all we want to do. That's all we want to do as artists, is live our best life, create stuff and get it out there, and then create something again and get it out there. And for a great number of people, creating something commercial is great. You go out there, it takes you maybe a couple weeks of work and it's off. Because a lot of the times for especially for the stuff now that's like your Marvels and, anything that's Disney related and it's high concept, those guys have a paint by number formula. You could stack all those movies one on top of the other and they'll hit the same beats all the way through. And, that's good. That's awesome. They know what their audiences want. And those writers have an easy job. They know by this moment, this needs to happen. By this moment, this needs to happen. If that feeds their soul or their bank account, I say power to them. Hopefully it does both. Hopefully it does both. But if you desire to make meaningful content, you really have to get that out. Even if you're a writer, it's just writing the script, just purging it, getting it out of your system. And then you turn around and you write something commercial, but you have to get it out of your system. You have to feed that beast.
Why is it so hard to make a great movie?
That's a good one. I think, one, it depends on your definition of great. I think that so many people are caught up in everybody else said it was great. And I think that's where most movies go wrong. Somebody will tell somebody, oh, your movie's like this, but with a little bit of that. And they go, I didn't see that, but okay. And then they go back and they start looking at that movie and they want to polish it now and make it a little bit more like that movie. And it's that whole like looking at the guy next to you thing, and judging yourself by how far you've gotten ahead of everybody else that is your peer or your colleague or whatnot, trying to just get ahead of them, and judging your success by how much more success you've had than them. And that includes making a great movie. I consider a great movie to be one where I watched that movie and I couldn't turn it off. I couldn't turn it off. That's watching it though. I couldn't turn it off. One of my favorite movies is 44-Inch Chest. Nobody's seen it. Well, I shouldn't say that. Let me not say nobody's seen it. Most people in the US haven't seen it. But it's called 44-Inch Chest. I love that movie from beginning to end. And then I went online one day and I saw the reviews and I was like, what? I don't get it. This movie was incredible. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. It was so well written. Every element of filmmaking was done to the nth degree. I just didn't understand it, right? So I don't know if certain people walked away going, I guess we didn't make a great movie. I felt they made a great movie. I felt they made one of the best movies ever. I did, and it's a small little movie, takes place in a flat, I think it's an incredible movie. I think it's a great movie. A lot of other people didn't think so. But maybe the person who made the movie said, that's exactly what I wanted to make, because that's how I would feel. When I sit down and I watch a film of mine, it's all about how much of what was in here made it on the screen. And if it made it on the screen, if one day when I get to at least 93% of whatever I wanted being on the screen, I'm going to say that's a great movie. That's a great movie. That's a successful movie. I've made something successful, because that's what success means to me. That's what a great movie made by me means, right? And I'm hopeful that that person who made 44-inch chest felt that way, because maybe people don't feel that that was a great movie.
You said it was a foreign film?
It's made in the UK. It has Ray. Oh, it's gonna bother me that I can't remember his name.
Liotta?
But
Liotta?
no, not
Okay.
Ray Liotta. He was in the Jack Nicholson movie when he played the gangster, the Irish gangster, with Leonardo DiCaprio and all those guys. I can't remember his name right off the top of my head, but you've seen him a million times. And when you see 44-inch
Oh,
chest,
Fiennes? Or no, Roy
no,
Fiennes. Okay.
no. It's like, I want to say it's like Ray, like, I don't know why I want to call it like Cockburn or something like that, but I know that's not what it is. But it's, as soon as you see him, you're gonna say, "Oh, that guy,"
Okay.
you know. But it's him. It's so many people, so many names, so many people that you're gonna recognize immediately. Right, as soon as it starts, you're gonna see 4 people you've seen in every movie you've ever seen, and you're gonna say, "Oh, okay." But they're all UK actors, right? And the story is very simple. There's a 44-inch chest, and there's a guy inside of there, and the main character, the protagonist, is trying to decide, should he kill him or not kill him? Very simple premise. He invites his friends over. His friends are gangsters just like he's a gangster, and they're trying to help him work through his problem to decide if he should kill this guy. Do you know who this guy is? This is the guy that's been sleeping with his wife. And the whole movie, I'm not ruining it, that's the movie. They're trying to decide, should he kill the guy or shouldn't he? That's the whole movie. And I'm telling you, it is a perfect movie from start to finish.
Does it take place in one room?
It doesn't take place in one room, but definitely in one flat.
Okay.
One flat. It's done to an incredible level of filmmaking. Writing, directing, editing, score, everything is incredible. The acting is impeccable. The special effects are impeccable. Yes, there are special effects even in this small film. Everything was done so perfectly. So the definition of great is really, kind of subjective in terms of why is it so hard to make a great movie. I think if you have succeeded at accomplishing what you wanted to accomplish and you feel successful in it, it's a great movie in terms of one that you've made. Now, if you are talking about just watching movies, yeah, there's a lot of movies that will let you down, And maybe this person who thinks that they made a great movie was just like a guy who I was telling you about who stunted his growth because all he's concerned about is how he measures up against the other filmmakers that he knows in his peer group. And if he's thinking about that and he's constantly throwing in stuff and falling back on bad habits and never growing, he may be satisfied, but he hasn't made a great movie. I think that you have to be beyond that. One of the best, quotes is from The Art of War, where it talks about, making yourself invincible, right? And invincible doesn't mean that you can't, that you win. That doesn't mean you win. All that invincible means is putting yourself beyond the possibility of defeat. And the only way to do that is by truly knowing yourself. You have to truly know yourself and not spend your time so concerned with what everybody else is doing. It's one of the reasons why I took down my personal profile on Facebook. I don't want to know what everybody else is working on. I just want to focus. I just want to focus and I want to grow. That's all I want to do is focus and grow. And so you have to be without that vanity. You have to be without that ego so that you have the ability to grow. And when you are making something, you're constantly growing and getting better, and you can understand what didn't work, what did work. You can understand how could I have better communicated that so that it ended up on the screen the way that I wanted it to. And how close did I get to the vision that I had in my head? How close did I really truly get? And even with Wanted One, where I consider it to be my best film to date, if you ask me how close I got, I'd say 75% if I'm being generous with myself. If I'm being generous with myself, I got 75%. I'm trying to get in the 90s. I'm trying to get in the 90s. And so that I can consider it a great film. So that I can consider it a successful film. I find that our greatest enemy, besides constant comparing yourselves to your peers, the enemy of great or the enemy of good is sometimes trying to be great as opposed to just trying to make the best movie possible. You're trying to be great. Don't try to be great. Just try to be truthful and honest to the story, to your characters. Try that. Be as honest and truthful as you can in that moment. That story, like I said, that truth may not resonate with everybody in the sense of it's their truth, but they have to understand that you were being honest when you were making this film. One of the 48 laws of power that I feel that people overlook is the one that it says, always know who you're effing with. In this industry, it's so easy to just cast someone aside and say, this person is nobody. Person doesn't matter. This person isn't someone that can help me get to the next wrong. Because you're so caught up in yourself, right? You always have to take time to, and I'm going to back out of it to say it from another perspective. You always have to step outside of what you're trying to accomplish and understand that your main objective too is to be of use and to be helpful. Because if you're of use and helpful, people like to have you around. If you're willing to share your knowledge and your experience, people love to have you around. So don't think about always what someone else can do for you. Understand what you can do to help them as well. In all of that, never treat someone as if they're insignificant or if they don't matter. Always know who you're effing with because you never know. That one person could have been the key to an opportunity that would have completely changed your life. You have no idea. Even if you are, I preach so much about taking your destiny in your own hands, but you don't have the ability to control much of anything outside of yourself. These other people can open doors for you. And it may be that maybe you open the door for them and you just walk through with them. Maybe you just help this person go to the next level and then they say, you know what, I remember that time, this guy, and you just never know. So always know who you're effing with,
Which law is that? That's good.
Ooh, I don't know which one it is, but it's in the 48 laws of power. Always know who you're effing with,
I'll have to go back to it. Yeah, maybe I'll re-listen.
Yeah. I mean, that book is, I think it's a more timely version of Art of War. That's what I think.
Sure.
I think it's better written for this period.
Joston, we had this comment come in from one of our viewers, and it reads, "Guys, I'm so scared. There are a certain amount of movies I want to create, and I figured the best route to start would be with screenwriting, but I just wish I had a guide or something for the journey. It seems like people really spend years doing so much work and only have results after like a decade. I'm not sure if I want to be a screenwriter, but I do know that I have movies I want made. Help. What advice can y'all give me?" So...
Wow. Pictures that he wants to get made, but not quite sure how to go about it, and doesn't want to spend decades doing something he doesn't love, or she doing stuff they don't love in order to make that happen. I would say pick a discipline and know that that's your focus and just start making stuff. Just start making stuff. I think everybody gets so caught up in all the reasons why they can't do something, they never think about why they can. And I don't know what that is about us as artists that makes that thought pop into your head. But whenever I do something, my wife will tell you, I tell you 1,001 reasons why we'll succeed. And you'll have to tell me all the reasons why we can't. And I'll tell you every reason why I can overcome that too. That's really what it's about. Get out there and make it happen. Just get out there and make it happen. If you know that screenwriting isn't where you want to be, see if you can get somebody who is a screenwriter to do that part of it. And then you just get out there and you make it. I don't know what it is this person was trying what discipline they were trying to work in, whether it was producing, directing, writing, acting, I don't know. But whatever it is, know that that's your main thing. And the pieces that you don't want to concern yourself with in terms of learning how to do it and becoming very proficient in it, I would say piecemeal that out. Like get someone else who is just as eager to create something as yourself and say, let's create this together. You handle that part, I'll handle these parts. And just do it that way. And just get to creating. Just start creating stuff.
Have you always had that belief in yourself? Where you can think of all these reasons why you will succeed?
No, I don't think I've always had that. I think that I've always been by myself wanting people to include me in something. And I went through my life with that until one day I no longer cared what everybody else was thinking or doing or willing to accept me. And that's what was able to help me become more and more successful, because I realized the only difference between, like, I'm the only difference between possible and impossible. That's really it. I am. So if that is the truth, then I don't really need any of these other people. I don't need their approval. I don't need their guidance. I don't need anything. I can go over here and start making my own mistakes. When I speak to someone else, I want to learn from their mistakes. That's what I want to learn from. Whatever advice you have, it came from your mistakes. I want to know about your mistakes. If you have something to share, if you don't, just don't stand in my way, because the train is moving this direction. If you stand there, I'll run you over because this is where I'm going. So I don't really need any of it. I came to a realization that when I made Adam K, if you look at it, I had to make up credits because I didn't want to look like I did everything, but I did everything. It was me and my wife. She handled holding the boom pole. She did makeup. She did special effects. She handled catering. And I handled everything else, and it was the two of us making a movie. And we made it for $1,500. And everybody thinks we spend a crap load more than that, but nope, that's all we spent. And it was proof. I don't need a bunch of people to make that happen, and neither does anyone else. Sit down, take a camera or camera phone or something and start shooting something.
Was there a specific incident or something that happened that made you realize I don't need the group? That you're willing to share?
No, I mean, I think more than anything, it was the constant disappointment, because when you're starting out and you don't have very much money, you start to see who will work with you for very little money, right? So their incentive is only that very little money. That's it. It's not the passion. It's not growing with you. It's not any of that stuff. They have no investment in your journey or theirs whatsoever. They want that $50 or $100 that you can pay them. And guess what happens? If somebody else comes along and says they'll give them $200, they will be off your set and you will be there by yourself. And that happened to me, numerous times, where people would just bail. I was shooting something, a short film, and they just bail and that's it. Or they don't show up. And you're like, what is this, And so I went into Adam K and I wanted to see, can I shoot this myself? I shot another film called Bleed for Me. And I shot that one completely by myself. That one was me taking the boom pole and propping it up in a corner so that it would capture audio. And then I would shoot with the camera, and I would be setting up the lights, and I would order food and bring it over, I literally shot Bleed for Me by myself and edited it, But it was because so many people that I brought aboard just flaked. And I began to realize I don't need any of these people, actually. I mean, it's good to have them around, it lightens the load a bit, but I don't need them. And so once I really realized that my only reason for bringing someone on board, if I have the money to pay them well, the reason why you're on this project is because you do something better than I could myself. And you truly do lighten the load. But if it's something that I realize at any point that I'm just better off doing it myself, I will. I'll just do it myself because it's better off that way.
How does someone maximize their chances for breaking in Hollywood, whatever breaking in is?
In the shortest answer, the same way you can increase your odds of winning a boxing match. Throw a whole lot of punches. Now, does that mean you'll win? No, it just gives you a puncher's chance, right? So if you just keep taking your shot, eventually something will land, hopefully. Now, if you're looking at a more skillful way to get there and to continue to work, I say perfect your craft and constantly take opportunities to get more experience and to be helpful, to put yourself in a position to better utilize those muscles and those strengths of yours, and make those weaknesses no longer a weakness, make them an advantage. Start to do that so that you become not only better at the craft, but you can navigate the system a little bit better, because that is more helpful. But I think those are the ways you increase your odds as well, in a more calculated way. And I tell people too, I tell this to actors, I tell this to writers, I tell it to anybody. Keep creating your own content. Keep creating. Because even though no one is going to come looking, just odds, nobody's going to come looking at your web series and saying, that needs to be on NBC. That's not really happening. But what it does, it allows you to grow. It allows you to do what most people would do in a film school, which is you get to fail and fail and fail and fail until you're no longer failing, right? Our greatest enemy is that we keep waiting for someone to give us a shot. And if you haven't had enough shots, you're just failing under their watchful eye. That's all you're doing. So why not do that on your own? Just shoot some stuff, get more experience, work through your strengths, understand what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, and begin to work through those things and make those, your advantages as well, and just become all around a great technician in your craft, as well as a great creative in your craft.